God, I'm back again, aren't I? Just want to say thank you to Magnus for becoming a member in my absence. Now, yes, it is another Catz video this week. I'm on holiday. I'm making the most of it. What can I say? I've got another couple of weeks. I'm going to try and get a bit of content out. Why not? It's all a bit of fun. I originally debated Kent Hovind when it was coming up to Christmas. And we're about on the anniversary of that. I think very close to the anniversary. So I thought, if I'm going to do a stream, I know I want to be replaying and rewatching some of my old streams in a watch along. So that is exactly what I'm going to do. First of all, though, before we get into it and start watching it, we did a stream on Tuesday and I had a lot of people telling me the audio sucked ass really bad. Can you just let me know whether you can hear me clearly? Because, yeah, a lot of people said it was unwatchable because of the audio. So, I'll just see what you've got to say about that. Anyway, the idea of this is, yeah, just to sit back, just kick back. Oh, audio's good. Thanks, Clive. Just to sit back, chill, and watch it. If you send me questions, I'll pause it and we'll have a chat. If you tag me in with any question, and it's all good. It's just a chill watch along. So, without further ado, I have skipped the starting. We're about to go into my opening speech. So it's me versus Kent Hovind. AT2 Productions is moderating here, and we are on a Marvel Girls channel. The link to this debate is in the description. Please check out Marvel Girls channel, and this never would have happened without her. So, Mandeville says that like your head. I don't know what I've missed there. Okay, right. I'm going to press play. Let's see how this goes.
Here we go. Right.
Hang on, bollocks. Let me get the audio so I'm not getting audio through there. Right, let me know if the audio doesn't work.
So this isn't going to be a debate where I sit here and just try and defend evolution against somebody that thinks evolution is ridiculous. What we're going to do in this debate, what I'm going to make sure
Can you hear the
is
screen
look
share?
At both sides of the argument, and we're going to see which side of the argument is more scientifically sound. How does creation against science stand up when compared to evolution? So we're going to start with some claims that Dr. Hovind has made over and over and over again. And Mr. Dr. Hovind, if you think I'm misquoting you at any point, just butt in and tell me, okay?
Okay.
Right. So I've heard Dr. Hovind say many, many times that the Earth is about 6,000 years old, and about 4,000 years ago, there was a big flood, which essentially wiped out all the creatures on the planet, apart from those that were saved on Noah's Ark. And those individual animals were the first of a kind, which then speciated to get all the different species we've got now. So let's look at the science of the flood. I've also heard Dr. Hovind say that that this flood, obviously it was a very quick flood. It drained very, very quickly. And as it drained quickly, that's where we got the layers of strata, and that's where the fossils were deposited. Have I misquoted you at any point yet, Dr. Hovind, or is that about what you'd say?
Well, a little bit. I would say 44.
I don't know why I kept calling him doctor.
Bible, and it wasn't the draining.
I kept calling him doctor, and we're not really sure. I think I was being a bit too polite.
Tide going up and down. So it'd be during the flood, most of it. Pretty close. Yeah. Getting close.
So the strata formed extremely quickly. So let's look at that claim to start with. We have the flood. We have the strata forming, these layers forming during the flood. We have this fast flowing water with sediment coming out of suspension. Now, let's have a look at what we see when things come out of suspension in the real world. You can see by the picture I've got in front of you there. When that happens in the real world every single day in our observable, the world around us, we see density layers form. We see the most dense sediment sink into the bottom to be covered by layers and layers that are subsequently less dense as you go higher. But when we look at the rocks around us, that is not what we see. We don't look at the Grand Canyon and see a decrease in density. When we look all over the world, we see layers of rock that are mixed in density. This very, very fundamental thing flies in the face of what Dr. Hovind is saying. Nowhere in science do we ever see this sort of process, sedimentation, that gives us a mixture of layers. So what I'll be challenging Dr. Hovind on later on is, can he actually explain using science why, when we look at the strata in the real world, are they not in order of decrease in density from bottom to top?
And spoiler alert, he couldn't do that.
We're not going to dance around that. Can I have the next slide as well, please? Thank you, Jared. Right. But it's not just the sediment that the floodwaters have ignored. If we look at the fossils as well, it seems that the floodwater hasn't had, or the density of the fossils hasn't had any effect either. We don't see the biggest, heaviest, most dense fossils at the bottom. We don't see the lightest ones at the top. We see anything but that. It's almost as if the density of the sediment and the density of the fossils have absolutely no link whatsoever in terms of where they fall. But again, that's not what we see in science, in the real world. So again, I'm going to be asking Dr. Hovind afterwards, can he actually scientifically justify and give me examples of where I can see things not conforming to what we know are the laws of physics? Can I have the next slide, please, Jerry? But if we go further on, we can talk about the water having a complete mind of its own. Not only has it completely ignored density when it's been dropping the layers, but it's also taken time to deliberately organize the layers of fossils in increasing complexity. The most simple single cell organisms, the deeper down we go, becoming more and more complex as we go up. The water almost has a mind of its own and has arranged those for us. When we use radioactive dating, and I know Dr. Hovind is going to challenge me on this later on, and I really, really hope he does, because I'm looking forward to that conversation. But radioactive dating as well, you go down through those layers. Radioactive dating shows an Earth that is far, far older than 6,000 years. It shows fossils that are far, far older than 6,000 years old. And again, the water seems to have taken these fossils and put them in an order of increasing age, as shown by radioactive dating. Again, it's almost like the water has a mind of its own, and it's trying to trick us. Now, this is the same all over the world. It's not just in one part. This is worldwide. Now, when we look at fossils such as, sorry, I just blabbed a little bit there. When we look at dinosaurs or humans, we also never, ever, ever, ever find fossils out of place. We never find a human fossil next to a dinosaur fossil. It's like the water itself has got a mind of our own. And this leaves me with 2 points. If we're going to start the assumption off, because I'm not going to argue with you on religion, so I'm just going to say from the word off, my personal beliefs have got nothing to do with it. Let's say God exists, okay? And then this isn't an argument against an atheist. Let's just say God exists. Why would God trick us? Why would God create a whole different set of laws of physics for the deposition after the flood or during the flood that we've never seen since? Why would he create such different laws to trick us into thinking the flood didn't happen? But it gets a little bit crazier than that. So if we can just skip on to the next slide, Joe, please. So 4,400 years ago, you said, was the flood. And after the flood, these animals that were taken onto the ark, these living creatures, these living things that were taken onto the ark, these kinds, if you like, they've then speciated. And I've heard you yourself say that you think speciation is a thing. You're happy with microevolution, yeah?
It depends on what you mean by the word microevolution, but yes, variations certainly happen within the kind. No argument.
Okay, so let's just take a look at how scientifically valid this argument actually is then. Let's take a simple animal like a rabbit. Now, there's well over 300 rabbits. Well,
I won't keep interrupting unless I get loads of questions, just every now and then. But I really like this argument. I think it's really difficult for the creationists to refute. And I'm not no expert on this topic by any stretch, but I really, really like this argument. If it's the one I think I remember making, I've not seen it since I did it.
On the planet, if we go back 4,000 to 5,000 years with the number of rabbit species we've got now, since that first rabbit kind stepped off the ark, we've got to have a new species of rabbit every 12 and a half years. Every 12 and a half years to get all the rabbits we've got now if we've come from a single kind. But obviously, I don't think he's taken just, if you're going to use the word kind, I think you'd maybe class a hare.
Because I'd lose.
As a rabbit kind. So we can go on to the next slide as well. If we then factor in all the species of hare, and you'll notice the Christmas hat on there because it was Christmas when we were supposed to do this debate first time. I've not changed the PowerPoint since. Maybe I should have changed the picture. But if he was going to include hare in the rabbit kind, then suddenly we need a new species every 8 years. Now, I have absolutely no idea of any animal the size of a rabbit that creates a new species every 8 years. And I'll be challenging you again later on, if you don't answer these questions, to give me examples of animals that are speciating so regularly, splitting, creating new species so regularly, because to me, they just don't exist. But it gets even, well, we could even have the pika to that as well, couldn't we? And then we're looking at new species every 5 or 6 years. But if we come away from rabbits, and if I can have the next slide, please, Jared, we could maybe look at the fly kind. Now, I'm not up to speed with the scripture. I don't know if flies went on the ark or if flies are 6,000 years old. So let's look at both. If they went on the ark with 120,000 species of flies, we'd need a new species of fly to be arriving every just less than every 2 weeks. All right, 30 new species a year we would be getting if they went on the ark. If they didn't go on the ark, we'd still be needing.
No, I'm not stopping for copyright. I have got permission from Marvel Girl to play this.
In 20 new species every year. So still nearly one new species of fly a fortnight. Or do we lump other things in with it? So if I can have the next slide, please, Jared. If you're going to talk about kind, would wasp be a fly kind? Would a bee or an aphid, would they be fly kind? If so, we're totaling well over 1 million species. We're needing a new species to be created from that first original kind that you're going to call it. We need that to be created just every few days. There is no species out there, no animal out there or living organism out there that is creating new species at this pace. And I will be challenging you and holding your feet to the fire if you can't give me an example of speciation that happens that quickly, because these are the real numbers. This is the real maths. This is the reality of the situation. We have over 1 million of these fly kind. So why are they not speciating as regular? But we could go on to the next slide, please, Jared. And we could talk, to the next one. I've put 2 in there for some reason. Thanks. So we could go on and we could talk just about beetles. And, we're not even putting beetles with fly kind. And again, assuming they weren't on the ark because they could fly. Again, we need more than one new species every single week to reach the maximum number of species we've got now. But we
just want to address this one. Sorry, I've been watching Will Duffy, and I've had a few comments, and I'm not suggesting, Todd, you've said this. I'm not suggesting you have. It's just reminded me. I had a lot of people send me messages saying, why don't you make videos about Will Duffy? Why are you such a hypocrite? Why are you not, showing Will Duffy up to be a creationist and a younger? Well, he is a creationist, and he's quite open about his beliefs. But the point of my videos, for anybody, if there is anybody out there wondering that, is like, I'm a science teacher. That's what I've always done, and I want to preserve, science education. I want to make it as effective as possible. And if somebody is using the beliefs in either a flat Earth or creationism to do some kind of online activism to try and reach children, that obviously can easily be reached through YouTube and Facebook, etc., and trying to get them to doubt what they're learning from the science teachers or trying to divert them down an anti-science path, then I'm going to go after what they say online and I'm going to correct it. What I'm not going to do is just make a video against any old person who happens to be a creationist, who doesn't have an online presence, isn't engaging in activism. And Will is a creationist, but nothing I've seen about him whatsoever is activism. I mean, he's not a flat earther, and he couldn't have been more fair to the flat earthers he's taken down to Antarctica. So I don't know. I don't know what your thoughts are on that, but that's why I'm, I quite like Will Duffy. I think he seems like a really nice guy. Just my thoughts anyway. Oh, I've got 2 screens and I don't know where my mouse is actually.
Just don't see it. We just don't see anything splitting off into different species that often. So just a bit of a recap before I go a little bit further. We do not see anywhere the laws of physics operate in the way that you need them to operate to produce these layers of rock that are in different densities, not descending density. We don't see any laws of physics that makes water intelligent to sort out organisms from less complex to most complex. We don't see speciation happening at the rate it needs to happen. None of these things happen. And unless you can provide some sort of evidence as to why you think this can happen, then your argument has already failed before you've even spoken. But let's have a look at the reliability of the Bible and how we can take it literally. Can we just skip on to the next one?
So I'll just address this one more. I don't want to spend the whole thing talking about Will, especially if it's stuff that I don't know is true. So I don't know any of this is true. Don't want to, be defaming somebody if it's not true. I'm not saying you haven't read this or anything like that. But I'll just say it one more time. If somebody's engaging in activism that is going to be reaching children and putting online activism that's going to be reaching children and putting them off their science education. As a science teacher, I started the Conspiracy Catz channel to target that. I can't do anything about fundamental churches out there that haven't got a huge online presence. I can only do what I can do, but my priority is stopping online activism or countering online activism. I'm not going to stop it, am I?
Now, this again isn't about being religious or not being religious or atheist or not. It's just looking at, can we take the Bible literally? Here is a passage I'm sure you're familiar with, and I'm going to hold my hand up. I did pinch this from Fight the Flat Earth. So if he's watching, thanks, buddy. A little passage in the Bible where somebody is being told by God to create an impossible physical object. Now, you said in the build up to this, Affer, that you used to teach geometry for 15 years. So I'm sure by looking at that, why that is a perfectly impossible object. But yet God is implying that can be made. And for those people that haven't seen that before, essentially, you can't make a circle of those dimensions because pi would end up being 3, not 3.14. It's a physically impossible object to make. So another thing, I haven't got a slide for this, but also when we're talking about the age of the Bible, and I'd like your opinion on this later on as well, God didn't say to Adam and Eve, go and populate the earth. God said to Adam and Eve, go and replenish the earth, as if life had been there before Adam and Eve. So there's lots of contradictions, but I'm not into scripture, so I'm not going to stick with those too much. But if we can skip on to the next slide, please, Jared, thanks. So we go back to what we actually can see, what we actually know. And what we actually know are, we do have these layers of fossils. That is a fact. You can see them. We do have these layers of...
Yeah, I really banged on this, didn't I?
Sorry, someone's speaking there. I'm getting feedback.
I interrupted myself.
Right, sorry. So this is a fact. Now, I know that if we were only talking about fossils as evidence for evolution, then, it could be argued there's a lot of interpretation. It could be argued that fossils are put together incorrectly. And even though we get there in the end, there'll be a room for a lot of flaws. So how do we take other bits of evidence and back up this fossil record? Well, we look at genetics.
Yeah. Good.
Can we skip 2 slides on, please? And this will be the last thing I say, because I know I'm droning on a bit, and then I'll pass it over to Kent. Kent, I'm sure you're familiar because you've been doing this for a long time, right? You've done over 200 debates. We can see that on the screen. I'm sure you're familiar with what ERVs are. Yeah. Endogenous retroviral DNA insertions.
Hi, Sean.
Okay, now we know that these are insertions that viruses put into our DNA, and they've all got the same characteristic structure. They've all got the GAG gene, the POL gene, the EMV gene, and these long terminal repeats on either side. And we know what those genes do. One of the genes causes the capsid around the virus. One of them contains reverse transcriptase, which is a purely viral enzyme. And the EMV one has a couple of different jobs, but
it's not here yet.
It allows a virus to enter a cell. Now, these retroviral DNAs are inserted into the human genome. Jared, can we go back to the previous slide that we skipped over? Thank you. Now, the way that we use ERVs as evidence to back up the fossil records is what we've got there on the screen right now. These are the fossil records that have existed for a long time. We start off with obviously Afarensis right at the bottom, all the way up to Homo sapien at the top. And those coloured dots represent how ERVs are used to back up the fossil record. Now, an ERV insertion, we look right down at the one at the very bottom. We've got that little blue dot there. These ERV insertions happen in a 1 in a 50 million chance location. I want that number to sink in. A 1 in a 50 million chance location. So if I'm infected with a virus and you're infected with the same virus, the chance of that integration happening at the same point in our DNA is 1 in 50 million. But we can pass that insertion on to our offspring. Now, if we have a look at the fossils here, we can see where it's marked in blue. And this is obviously a representation of, if you want to see all the exact examples, I've linked a scientific paper that goes through them on the right-hand side, so I'm not just making this up. But we can see that the blue insertion is at the bottom, and that filters through all the organisms, all the the different species of human that are there. But when we get to Homo erectus, though, we get a fresh insertion, a yellow one. We don't see the yellow before, but we see it in all the descendants afterwards, and so on and so on and so on. These insertions in that 1 in a 50 million chance location. ERVs, endogenous retroviral DNA, is such a strong piece of evidence for
just that. There's no evidence that Will has ever sued anybody. Like, I understand, like, nobody likes creationists trying to interfere with the education system. Nobody likes that whatsoever, which is why, you know, I made videos like this and did debates like this. But we can't just say because, you know, because creationists have done that in the past, therefore Will does that. You know what I mean? I don't want to like defame the guy on here. Like, so yeah, creationists like Will. So people with his beliefs have done that. But you know, I don't want to throw Will under the same bus. And if he does sue to get creationism taught in school and evolution taken out, and then I'll be the first person to start making videos on it.
Or evolution, and it backs up the fossil record, certainly for human evolution. And we share 7 of them with our closest ancestor, the chimp. So I would again love your interpretation of how that could come about by coincidence if it wasn't evolution. Now, I've got lots and lots. I can say, you can see my PowerPoint is quite thick and full, just like yours. But I've gone on for quite some time, and I'm not going to bore everybody. I would really like some responses from you. But what I will also say is we're here to talk about evolution. We're here to talk about animals. We're not here to talk about the evolution of the universe or the Big Bang or anything like that. And I'd like to keep the debate purely on evolution of animals. So I'll pass that over to you now.
All right. Thank you, sir.
All right, it's drinking game time now. Like, how many times is he going to say you came from a rock?
All right.
All right. So, Kent, so you know the time that you are going to have allotted to you is 16 minutes. Give me one moment, and everyone will be able to see your full screen momentarily for your segment of the presentation. And the clock is yours.
Oh, I'm not seeing my screen up there.
We can see it on the live stream.
Everybody else can see it. Everybody but me. Oh, well, okay. Anyway,
I can fit yours out.
No, yeah. Well, thank you so much. Yes, I do believe the Bible is true. I believe the evolution theory is the dumbest religion in the world. And I think I can answer every question that you gave, but there's too many. You know, it's like a shotgun. I'm supposed to stop every one of these BBs. All of them have a simple answer. We have a science center here in Pensacola. I mean, in Lenox, Alabama, straight north of Pensacola. You can come down and take a tour of the place, and I'll be glad to give you a tour around our science center and everything. The Bible says clearly that God created the world, and that's what I believe is true. And as I always start off my debates, I point out this word evolution has 6 meanings. You've said you don't want to talk about cosmic evolution, which is the first one, the origin of the universe, has to come from the Big Bang, or chemical evolution. That would be a problem, I think, how we get all these different chemicals. Or thirdly, stellar evolution. Well, I will avoid those, but I think I would leave it in the record, Your Honor. This is a major problem for the evolutionist, how to explain how stars and planets got here. Number 4 would be the origin of life, which is also a major obstacle right there called organic evolution. I'd like to leave that in the record that this has not been answered. None of these have been answered by any evolutionist ever. Number 5 is what we call microevolution or macroevolution. I think it's a lousy term, and microevolution, but we never see any animal change to a different kind of animal. Never. No farmer in the history of the world has ever seen any plant or animal produce other than its kind, which is why the atheists and evolutionists always go to the fossil record. I say, first of all, there is no such thing as a fossil record.
Same old shit. It still says now.
Lots of them. We have a bunch here in our museum. I got petrified clams right here beside me. There's no question there are lots of fossils, but it's not a record. They don't have a date stamped on them, and they don't talk. We're putting our interpretation on them. And the finding them in this order that you talked about is interesting. Let me get, let's see, slide number here. All over the world, I live in a gravel pit in Lenox, Alabama, a former gravel pit. It's now an amazing creation science center.
At the same
but
time,
all over the world, gravel is
You're not a child,
Oh,
you're a man.
sorry.
So stop wearing
I'm
so many
streaming this
layers to
from
go
a Marvel
outside
Girls channel.
and get the bearskin tactical hoodie 4.0.
Rounded off. And I'd like to answer some of your questions about why would the layers be sorted the way they are and the animals in this order. If you put rocks in a rock tumbler, let it run for 2 weeks and drive your parents crazy while it makes noise night and day, it will round off the gravel into polished rocks, depending on what kind of polisher you put in there. We see layers of strata and rock all over the world. I have a bunch of them right here sitting under my feet. There are 7 layers of gravel that they dug out of this gravel pit, 148 acres. These great layers of gravel extend all the way to North Carolina. There are hundreds, maybe even 1,000 or more gravel pits in Alabama, Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, Florida, that are digging from these same seams of gravel that extend all the way. Rocks automatically sort themselves, and you can have 2 densities of material in these little things you flip over. Mine's out in the field, but 2 layers of glass with sand in between. You only have 2 densities of sand, black and white in this case. You flip it over, and it makes 20 layers in seconds. You can buy them at Walmart for $10. It's called hydrologic sorting. So first of all, the creatures are not sorted in the order they put in the textbooks. I taught earth science also for 15 years. And the sorting, any sorting there is, would just as easily be explained by a flood. I'll show you. Oh, hang on. Oh, right here. We have right here layers of gravel, then layers of silt and sand or clay, and then another layer of gravel, pebble or sand. I cannot hear you.
Can you tell me, can they hear us all right?
Can you hear me okay?
The audience is saying that you are quiet.
You're a
so-
little bit quiet.
Okay, I'll talk into the mic better like this. Turn me up.
Turn him down. Turn him down even more.
Right, I'm working on it. Oh, hang on.
It's just the same dribble, though, isn't it? It's absolutely the same dribble. You know, the geological column can be explained by the flood just because it can.
How do I do that? Are you seeing? I don't know how to get that one over there. Did that do it? See, according to evolution, things get better automatically. I can't get it to work for me though, because I don't believe in it, I guess. I don't know how to get it to change.
While he's faffing about, I didn't remember he had these technical issues. It's not like me, flawless. I never have
can't
issues like this,
maximize it.
ever.
It's changing now, but can you see this here?
Yes.
Hello, Al, can you see this on my
Yes.
screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay, I do not get it to maximize here. There's my
Oh, for God's
mouse.
sake.
There, okay. When they dig for coal, they very frequently have multiple layers of coal that they go after. This is a common phenomena. They'll have a layer of coal, then a layer of gravel or sand or clay, another layer of coal. And coal can be formed quickly all over the world. Petrified trees. Zoom in on that. Or they're getting our picture, right? My picture kind of small. Double click in the
Oh,
picture.
for God's sake, Kent. I forgot you made such a hash of this.
All over the world, petrified trees are.
Just give a shout out to this guy. Many of you will know him. Many of you will know him. But if you don't, a lot of the videos I've done on this channel, especially the early ones, were far more serious videos and the flat earth stuff and really looking at dangerous misinformation. If you check out Mohammed Shafiq's channel, I don't think there's anybody who's quite had the impact that he's had and done the kind of investigative work and exposure that he has done. He was very, very underrated in terms of subscribers and views. I don't know if the algorithm kind of pushes that kind of stuff out, but he is well worth going and looking at his back catalogue. Like, just unbelievable some of the stuff he's done and still doing, I will say.
Found standing up, connecting all these layers. Now, I know, Al, you're very intent on the idea that the layers are different ages and represent different eons. That is simply not true. When you get petrified trees standing up, connecting all the layers, I think it's more common sense to say these layers formed very rapidly because the petrified tree would fall over before it could rot. And multiple layers are found frequently. Here's what happened. During the flood in the days of Noah, the moon would pull the tide up like it always does and hold it like a bump of water while we spin around. It would be a tidal change every 6 hours, high tide, low tide, high tide, low tide, except the moon is also moving, so it ends up 6 hours, 12 and a half minutes between high tide and low tide. Who cares? Well, if the moon is holding this bump of water up while we spin around under it, during the flood in the days of Noah, there would be nothing to interrupt this tide. Right now, the tide starts building up and it bangs into South America or North America. It gets interrupted. So we cannot get what's called a harmonic tide. But if the earth were completely covered in water, like the Bible says it was, and like there are flood legends, about 330 of them now on creation science, what's the name of that website? It has all the different flood legends on there.
Listen to him waffle through this.
The tide is interrupted. So in Florida, they get about a 4-foot tide. In the Bay of Fundy, Canada, they get about a 50-foot tide. But if the earth were not, if the earth were smoother, there's enough water right now on the earth, right now in the oceans to cover the earth 8,000 feet deep, 1.5 miles. So if the earth were completely covered in water, like the Bible says it was, the tide would become harmonic. And the physics all says this will be about a 200-foot tidal change every 6 hours, 12.5 minutes. Well, if you have a bump of water coming up right here in Lenox, Alabama, it's going to come up 200 feet, sit still for an hour, and then go down 200 feet, sit still for an hour, and then come up 200 feet, you're going to create a problem. At this latitude, we're at 31 degrees north latitude, 31.3366 if you're technical. At this latitude, the radius of the Earth times 2.
This does get better when we get into the back and forth, by the way.
2 times pi tells us that we have a circle to go around, cosine 31.35. Okay, right here. We have 21,264 miles around the Earth at this latitude to spin around in 24 hours, which means at Lenox, Alabama, we're going about 886 miles an hour. Equator is going 1,037, the North Pole is going 0. So if the Earth, if this bump of water has to come up and down within this 6 hours, 12.5 minute time frame, the water to fill the bump has to be rushing sideways. There would be times when the water would be rushing sideways at 800 miles an hour. It would sit still for a while and then leave a layer of sand or silt or clay behind when it sits still and then rush the other way. So you would get water rushing in and out just from the tidal change during Noah's flood every 6 hours and 12.5 minutes. So these layers, it would be a tidal surge when it gets to a maximum velocity and then slowly tapers off.
So bottom right arrow
I don't know what you're talking about.
on the bottom right of your
Bottom right arrow on the train here.
right there. That one.
Okay.
That's a little better.
There. You would get a number of phenomena like turbidity currents. You would get the hydrologic sorting happening because of Noah's flood. Let's see, rock tumbler.
He sounds like Eminem now, rapping.
Rocks around. We have tens of millions of round gravel rocks right here in Lenox, Alabama. Here's a picture of all the gravel pits in Florida, Alabama, Georgia. These pits go all the way to North Carolina, digging from the same layers. And rounded rocks are found all over the world. They were in a giant flood. Now, you mentioned about the Solomon's Sea being a geometrically impossible thing to build. Let me get this one over there on top of it, if I can.
Press escape. Press escape.
Let's see.
Come on, Kent.
Yes, press that.
I don't know. It's not showing over here. I don't know what to do about it. Let's see.
Yeah.
Hit what?
F.
No. Anyway, Solomon's Sea. I'll just read it.
I'll be honest, when he was doing this, when he was doing his speech, I kind of drifted off a little bit. Normally, I try and write things down to try and catch them later on. Or one thing I really like to do is get the screen grab and we can grab an image. And I have a blank PowerPoint. And while they're talking, I'll screen grab like images. And then it's if they say something stupid, I can prove it to them afterwards. Oh, bloody hell, Timo. Thank you so much for that, mate. That is very good. I don't know. I really appreciate that. Thank you. I don't know how people collect these when they are gifted out. But if you do collect one of them, there is a Discord server where that's where the kind of like the it's only for members, and you can come, and that is where we talk about suggestions for the channel and things like that. You'll also get early release to any videos, and probably 3 times a month maybe I'll drop little vlogs and stuff like that. So it's not, the Discord is really what I'm trying to build for the community. But the point is that there is a video showing you how to get onto the members Discord, because if you click the Discord link, it'll be on the members tab. You'll see it. If you click the Discord link, you might not think you're into the members Discord, because you've got to connect your YouTube channel to it first. But the YouTube, I've made a video to show you how to do it. Fucking arm waffling. I've made a video showing you how to do it. It takes about 20 seconds if you follow the instructions. Thank you, Timo, for that.
Yeah, the text here in 2 Chronicles chapter 4. You gave the 1 Kings reference to this. They're both mentioned in there twice. 1 Kings 7 and 2 Chronicles 4. Solomon made a molten sea of 10 cubits from brim to brim. A cubit is elbow to fingertip. And it says a line of 30 cubits encompass it about. So you are correct. That is mathematically impossible. Pi is 3.14159.263 or 265. And it goes forever. You figured it out for a trillion decimal places. Who cares? But you missed the part. In 2 Chronicles 4:5, it says the thickness was a handbreadth. Let me get this one. Alt V 144. There. Yeah, okay, got it. It says the thickness was a handbreadth. So you're correct. Pi times diameter equals the circumference. And it would appear to be a contradiction, 10 cubits across and 30 cubits around. But it's not a contradiction at all because it's a handbreadth thick. So I did a study of about 20 different people and said, how long is your cubit? What's your handbreadth? And do the math. If you take, if you're measuring 30 cubits around the inside, which would be the number you would need to calculate the volume of the bowl, the thickness of the brass would not matter to calculate the volume. It could be a mile thick. And the outside would be the distance you would need to go through a doorway to carry this thing through a door. If you take 10 cubits and subtract 2 handbreadths and divide backwards, you get 3.14159. So it is not a contradiction at all. You are assuming there's a contradiction. I think you're making one up because you want there to be a contradiction. I think I've answered all the supposed Bible contradictions in my seminar series, video number 7, question and answer, where I cover just contradictions in the Bible. Now, you mentioned that you thought the rapid species development. You're using linear progression rather than geometric progression. If 2 rabbits get off the ark and they have babies, and some of them move up where it's cold and some move where it's warm. Those with the thicker fur can survive the cold climate better. Nature will select certain ones to survive in a certain environment. Nature doesn't create a thing, it selects. The thick fur.
Brilliant idea for a Christmas stream. I know Clive is in the chat. Clive plays. Clive's quite good. I play. I'm rubbish, but I still play. I think that'll be a brilliant stream. Like we sort that out in the Discord, and we'll get on chess.com. We'll have an online tournament between us. That'll be brilliant fun.
Rabbits would survive better in cold climates, and the thin-furred rabbits would survive better in hot climates. But it didn't create the fur. It just selected something already in the gene code, which was some have thicker fur than others. Some people have more hair than others. So then you have 2 different breeding populations. So in the next generation, you could get a total of 4 possibilities. The next generation would be 8. The next generation would be 16. The math on all of yours is assuming they all had to come in a straight line. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And actually it's 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, 128, 256. So you're greatly wrong in your mathematics about the speciation number. But I want you to keep in mind, Al, this little minor problem you may have thought you pointed out about getting all these varieties of dogs or rabbits or chickens in just 4,400 years. For heaven's sake, Al, you believe all these animals came from a rock. You talk about a problem with speciation. What's the gene code in a rock? Where do you get the ERVs coming out of a rock? And you guys do believe life had to start from the soup, the prebiotic soup, which came from the rocks. So you're straining at a gnat and swallowing an elephant, son. The idea that all the rabbits in the world today, I don't know about how many varieties you said there were. I know there are 339 recognized breeds of dogs. I've had a family come to a seminar when I was speaking one time. They said, Mr. Hovind, our family's been in the dog kennel business for 100 years, 3 generations. Grandpa started it, Dad took it over, and I'm running it now. The guy said, I can promise you, we could, in 100 years, create all the breeds of dogs today from just generic mutts. We could selectively breed, and you only get a new generation of dogs every year. You take something smaller, like rabbits breed much faster. You get several generations per year. Or you take bacteria, where you get a generation every 20 minutes. But in all these millions of generations we've had of bacteria, they're still making baby bacteria.
He's confusing generations with speciation. Like my argument was you'd have to have a new species, with flies, for example, every few days. He's thinking, I didn't pick this up on the night. He's confusing like number of generations with number of new species formed. How did I not pick that? It's probably because I wasn't listening to him because he was boring me shitless. But that I've never picked up before just how dumb that was.
They're not making any, there are no 2-celled animals or 3-celled or 4-celled. It's not happening. I mean, evolution only takes place in imagination. Evolution is pure SpongeBob religion. That's all it is. Nobody's ever seen any animal or plant produce a different kind. Never. So it's not a problem with the varieties we see today to be produced in a few thousand years coming from Noah's flood. It's not a problem for all those layers to be deposited in 1 year, and then for all those layers to be eroded away as the flood water rushes off, probably in a matter of months. I would say Grand Canyon probably took 2 weeks max. Google dam break at Dinosaur Adventureland, and you'll see the dam that we made wash out in 7 minutes because we let the water go over the top and it washed it out. You can see the Tom Sauk Reservoir that blew one side out in St. Louis in 2005. One section, water went over the top. It lost a section of the wall, Tom Sauk, T-A-U-M-S-A-U-K, St. Louis, in 2005. It washed out a section, and 1.5 billion, with a B, billion gallons of water were lost in 10 minutes. And it carved a canyon down the side of the mountain on the St. Louis side. And in 10 minutes, dams break all the time and do enormous erosion. Look what happened to Mount St. Helens when that dam broke.
The fuck is he banging on about?
In 1982. So I think the Bible says in the last days, the scoffers, and I would put you in that category, are willingly ignorant, and I would put you in that category too, of the creation, how God made the world, and they're ignorant of the flood. God created the animals to produce a wide variety of offspring. It's amazing the varieties you can get in the variations that happen within the same kind. There are now 8 varieties of bears in the world, and they might have had a common ancestor called a bear. That does not prove bears are related to mosquitoes and whales and cactus. But you guys strain at this gnat of not being able to calculate how you get all these species. And again, you're doing the math wrong. But you strain at little gnats like that in the thickness of Solomon's Sea and say, oh, there's a contradiction in the Bible. Keep in mind now, we're not asking the Bible to be taught in the public schools. You guys are demanding that your religion be taught at taxpayer expense all over the world. The burden of proof's on you, not me. You got to prove that a mosquito and a cactus and a whale are related and had a common ancestor. We're not asking for our theory to be taught. If we were, the burden of proof would be on us. But I take the position that all observation of all of human history says whales produce whales, cows produce cows, cactus produce cactus, no exceptions.
90
you get
seconds.
Varieties within the kind.
Oh, nice.
That's all you get is a variation of the same kind. Thank you. Go ahead.
No, I was saying you still had 90 seconds left.
My throat hurts. You can have it. Go ahead.
All right, then.
Well done.
Right, let's see if I can get on there right. So what happens now?
Now we are going into the...
That was when I used to eat a lot more pies. I think it was about £30 heavier then.
The rebuttal phase, where you actually get to reply to all that Mr. Hovind has put forth to you.
And is there a time limit on this bit?
We are going to go with 10 minutes.
Okay, right. I will be quick. And then, yes, I'll be as quick as I can. So, we'll just start. Let me get my PowerPoint up. Tell me time's not started yet.
It has not.
Okie dokie. Right. I've jotted a load of things down here, so the order might be a little bit off. But let's just go with what we've got. Okay, let's begin. So first of all,
Time has started. Go for it.
I'm getting, I can hear.
We're getting feedback from Kent. There we go. We're all set now.
Yeah, turn your microphone off, Kent.
Right, so let's just recap with everyone what happened. I asked you very, very specifically at the beginning if you could explain to me, give me examples of any kind of animal that has the rate of speciation that it's got. And you massively dodged that question. You talked about geography. And if you want to talk about geography, we'll talk about how the flood managed to deposit all the kangaroos in Australia, should we? Yeah, and throw the polar bears to one pole on the earth. Like, you completely failed in any way, shape, or form to explain or give any examples of that rate of speciation. It was a massive dodge, as was your response to why we get these layers of rock of different densities. You talked about a child's toy that you flick over. You know, you've not provided anything of any scientific basis there. And what I'm after is an honest debate where you can give me some scientific explanation, not an analogy about flicking a toy, you know, not a made up explanation of the water spinning around the earth and maybe it can drop some sediment, which is what I've got. Maybe the water can drop some sediment and maybe it'll drop a bit more later on. Show me where we see anything like that in the real world. You haven't. You've completely left me unsatisfied and not let yourself down on that one. Sorry. Okay. Let's have a look at slide 7 of mine, Jared, please. Because we also you wanted to talk about the polystrate fossils. I'm not sure if I can see my slide on your screen. What do I need to click on?
Not yet. Actually, give me a moment to bring that back up for you. Didn't know you wanted to.
Oh, sorry.
Go back to that.
Yeah, there's a few. I'm going to go back to a few of these. Sorry, mate. Are we right?
I produced so many slides for this debate that by the time I finished, I couldn't remember what I got. So I felt totally unprepared because I'd lost focus of how much stuff there was.
Pause the timer while this.
Yep, we are good. We are. All right, which slide number?
One that's labeled 7. It will be. I'm not sure where it is now because they're all mixed. If you go down.
Yeah, sure. We've seen him.
25.
You showed me a picture of a tree growing through, some layers of rock. This is a book from the 1900s that details exactly how these polystrate fossils are made. John William Dawson, look it up. The science behind this has been known for a long period of time. Most of them are formed in swamp-like areas and rapid deposits of sediment in swamp-like areas that give you the picture you were showing me before. There is no explanation for how these are formed in areas that haven't been swamp-like in the past. This is well documented. If you can show me a very specific polystrate fossil like that, growing through absolutely solid rock that's never been, that's like never been in any kind of swampy area whatsoever, then I'd love to look at it. But polystrate fossils are absolutely well and truly understood. Let's look on to the next one. The tides. I think we've touched on that. Basically, when I asked, when you were talking about the tides, you basically just said, what if some water sloshed around on the earth and maybe dropped some sediment? I'm not giving that any time. It was a load of nonsense. The circle, you talk about the circle not being able to calculate pi correctly. You know, you told me there was no contradiction in the Bible with that. So what I'm going to take from that is that the Bible gives very unclear instructions. There was nowhere in that verse where the Bible said you're using the thickness of your hand to do that. There was nothing in that verse. It was essentially an extremely unclear instruction. And maybe that's a byproduct of nobody having the original Bible. Nobody's got it. Nobody's got the second version, the third version. What we are reading and have been reading for centuries is, you know, the 100, 200, 300, 400, 5,000th translation and version of that book that has been cobbled together. That's why it's unclear, and that's why we cannot take it literally like you're taking it. Now, you did use the comment before that kind will bring, you know, animals of the same kind can bring forth, and no animal has ever produced something that's not its own kind. So I'm going to take from that you mean no animal has ever brought forth another animal that cannot breed with cannot breed with its own kind, if you like. Let's just skip to slide 20, Jared. Is that okay? It's number 30 on there. So we're going down. Now, this is the Greenwich warbler. I'm sure you're aware of that. It's an example of a ring species. And this isn't just one on its own. If you skip to slide 31, just and then hop back, you can see there's absolutely dozens and dozens and dozens of ring species examples on the planet. You can go back up again, please. So a ring species will start with an original population, which you can see on the screen. Now, with the Greenwich warbler, they were around the Tibetan plateau, and that population, it split. Some of them went one direction around it, others went another direction around it, and as they went around it, speciation started to occur. But those populations that were living next to each other weren't far enough separated, so they couldn't breed. They could still breed. They were still the same kind as you have defined it here tonight, because they could still breed. Mm-hmm. However, once these populations had got around to the other side of the plateau, now they could no longer breed. And by your very definition that you have given us tonight, they can no longer be the same kind because they can't bring forth, they can't breed.
Ring species are a brilliant argument for that. And I seem to remember Kent really flapping at it. But yeah, he to me, it's a great argument. You know, we've started off with one population. We've ended up with two other populations that can now no longer interbreed. Therefore, they can't be the same kind. It's exactly what he was asking for. I love his response when he gets to it.
Ring species are very, very clear examples. Here we've got A will breed with B will breed with C will breed with D, but D and A have got absolutely no chance of breeding with each other because they are not the same kind. This is a prediction of evolution. It is not a prediction of creationism. I'll tell you what is a prediction of our current scientific model. The layers and the fossils in the place that we find them and see them now. That is not a prediction of creationism. You've had to ad hoc an argument about chucking water and hoping the sediment falls in the right way. This is a prediction of evolution. Now, what else have we got?
Still 1.25.
Okay. Genetic testing. One thing I want to ask you now, because you didn't touch the ERV, you completely left the genetics alone. You wouldn't go anywhere near it. So I just want a question. I'm hoping you can give me a yes or no answer. Do you believe that parental genetic testing works? Yes or no?
Can we answer now during your time?
Yeah, just a yes or no will do.
Oh, yes. I think it works most of the time. Yes, sir.
Okay, so the chances are, when we look at parental testing, we use genetic markers, and you use about 12 genetic markers in a typical parental test. And the chance of two people having those same markers, if they are not related, if they are not father and son, is 1 in 50,000. If we use 24 markers, it's 1 in hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands. I gave you an example with these ERVs, these insertions, that are a 1 in a 50 million chance that they will be in the same place. And we can trace these ERV insertions all the way through from old humans to modern humans as we see them now. And as we trace them through, those long terminal repeats, those repeating sequences on either side of those ERVs, they start to demonstrate a bit of drift, a bit of change. Because as we come further and further towards the present, and mutations affect those long terminal repeats, they become more and more dissimilar, or more similar as we go in the past. This was massively strong evidence. You didn't touch it. You didn't want to touch it. You completely dodged it. I really, really would like to hear you talk about the genetics and try and floor that argument. I'm also going to bring up isochron dating, because we didn't have the chance before, but I'm going to do it now in whatever time I've got left. Can you just skip up? How long have I got left, Jared?
90 seconds.
Right. Can you just find the isochron dating slide very, very quickly? It's a graph. There we go. You just click on that. Now, I want to go into this a lot more, and if you're willing, we'll have the debate on it. But essentially, radioactive dating proves that these layers of rock, proves that these fossils are way older than 6,000 years. Way, way older. Now, a criticism you'll have is that contamination can occur, and that can affect the date that we get. If you understand isochron dating, you will understand that isochron dating will show us whether a system has been closed to contamination or not.
Before I go on, that graph is rubbish looking at it now. It just looks like I've underlined the word isotope. It's supposed to be like a division showing like a ratio. It's supposed to be like a divide line. That is a really awful. I did a terrible job on that.
And I'm more than happy to get into this in the Q&A afterwards if someone wants to ask me. If you know about ice dating, you know that you can't argue contamination gives it a flaw in the date that they give. And I think that's probably my time up. So please be scientific.
Still at 30 seconds left, but...
Oh, still at 30 seconds. Yep. Right. What else can I talk about that I had written down? Yeah, I want to go back to the speciation. You just haven't touched it. The amount of new species we should be seeing on a weekly basis. You just simply refused to answer. You might think you answered it, but you just refused to answer it. And you said, well, maybe they were all created in different places a long time ago. That was your answer. All right. Give me something solid. Give me something scientific. Show me that creation is backed by science. Because so far, you haven't shown anything like that.
And time. All right. Let me get this set. Oh, look at that. You decided to take priority there, Marvel.
Oh,
It's okay. We'll go ahead and do it this way and let Kent have the floor for his entire rebuttal. And 10 minutes starts when you begin.
Okay, well, thank you so much. I think you can see why. And when I do debates, I ask very specifically that we talk about one topic at a time. What Al has done here each time he has spoken is thrown out 15 topics and then gets upset when I don't have time to answer one or two of them. This is typical. But Al, next time we do a debate, which is your favorite topic? You pick the top one. Hey, what? You give me the best 3 lines of evidence for evolution. Send it to me. You get prepared to defend it. I'll get prepared to rebut it. And we'll talk about one topic at a time because I cannot cover all this. And then you're going to think you won because I didn't get a chance to answer all of them. All of them can be answered very easily. And I do in my seminar, which you can see on our website, drdino.com. So
We had a second debate lined up and I did exactly what he asked for. And then he just never turned up on the night.
I'm going to try to take as many as I can in my 10 minutes allotted. And if I don't get the other ones, it's not because I'm afraid of them. It's because there isn't time. Okay. You brought up too many things. Now, how did the kangaroos get to Australia? After the flood, the ark landed in the country Turkey today, and the animals began to spread out. Kangaroos are less aggressive than tigers, so they would probably be driven to the migration, to the fringe of the migration wave.
That's it. The tigers chased the kangaroos all the way to Australia, and all the kangaroos ran together to Australia, being chased by the tigers, who then didn't end up in Australia. It's a flawless argument.
And animals since the flood are not leaving fossils behind. Animals die today by the millions, and they don't turn to fossils. Nearly all of the fossils we find, period, in the world would have happened because they were buried rapidly. So if the ice caps were larger and the oceans were lower, which would be the two things would happen automatically together. If you made the ice caps larger, the oceans would be smaller and lower. If you lower the oceans just a few hundred feet, you can look Google Map and zoom in on satellite view of any area. Look at England. Between England and France, that water is only 150 feet deep. The English Channel, 30 miles wide and 150 feet deep from here to the tree over there. So by lowering the oceans 200 feet, let's say, or 300 feet, everything becomes connected. Australia becomes part of Vietnam. All this is one giant peninsula. So the kangaroos could have easily migrated over a few hundred years. Several things are happening at the same time. They're fleeing from the more aggressive predators, tigers and lions, and that's not safe to have their babies in that neighborhood. So over many generations, they slowly migrate this way. At the same time, the ice caps are melting back and the water level's coming up. That's why we have a continental shelf. There are two parts to the ocean, the abyss, 12,000 foot deep average, and the continental shelf starting at about 300 feet. Well, 300 out of 12,000 is pretty small. But if you lowered the oceans 300 feet, made the ice caps bigger, both would happen simultaneously, you could walk anywhere in the world. The land bridge between Russia and Alaska would be about 1,000 miles wide, just by lowering the ocean about 300 feet. Between Alaska and Russia today, it's only about 60 feet deep. So Florida would be ginormous. You could probably walk over to Cuba and the Bahama Islands.
Good question, Mario. I don't know.
Bahamas, just by lowering the ocean. So I believe the kangaroos probably migrated, happened to go that direction, ended up trapped in Australia, protected, where they can develop into 20 different kangaroo varieties, but they're still kangaroo. And so that would have happened after the flood. Let's see. Speciation. You said I failed to explain the rate. You must not have heard me, son. I said you're doing it linear mathematics, arithmetic, instead of geometry, doing it multiplication. If you have rabbits produce babies that go to 2 climates, now you have 2 populations spreading out, and you can go from 2 to 4 to 8 to 16 to 32 to 64. You're wanting to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You're doing it with linear instead of logarithmic. So I did answer the question. Don't say I didn't. Answered it very carefully. Plus, you did not answer my question. You're saying there's a problem with getting all these varieties of rabbits from 2 rabbits. Son, you believe all the rabbits came from a rock. You do. That's what the textbooks teach. I show this over and over. It rained on the rocks for millions of years and turned them into soup, and the soup came alive. And somehow, in that first single-celled life form, it learned to be multicellular and turned to rabbits and whales and mosquitoes. That's got to be the dumbest theory in the history of humanity. Let me try to get a few more here. As far as isochron dating and radiometric dating, we just have a whole separate debate on that. Same thing on your ERVs. Again, that would take a long time. Let's have a whole separate debate. I think those can all be easily answered, but not in the 10 minutes allotted here. Let me pick some of the main ones I've got. You mentioned ring species. This happened with the kaibab squirrel and the Abert squirrel around the Grand Canyon. I agree. As animals diversify, like the warblers you mentioned, they went around a lake or plateau, and now they can no longer interbreed. Are they still a warbler? Are they still a bird? Is that enough evidence for you, the fact that we have two varieties of warbler that do not normally interbreed? Maybe they could be forced to interbreed, I don't know, but they don't normally interbreed with each other. And you think that's enough evidence to believe warblers are related to cactus and mosquito? You think that process could go on and change the warbler to anything other than a warbler? Same thing with the ring species of any of the ring species examples you guys want to give, whether it be the squirrels, the Abert squirrel, or the kaibab squirrel in the Grand Canyon or others. But the fact that they can no longer interbreed does not prove they did not come from an original ancestor. There are 8 varieties of bears that don't normally breed together, but they came from they originally could, and it's still a bear. A 5-year-old can tell you it's still a bear. Mackenzie is 5. She can tell you, she can look at both of those and say, that's still a bird, Mr. Hovind. That's still a bird. And you're going to say those 2 varieties of warbler is evidence for evolution when it's not. It's evidence of variation within the same kind. They're still a bird. As far as animals sorting by density, here's this little thing we have at Dinosaur Adventureland. There are 4 different densities of sand in this one: black, dark blue, light blue, and white. These 4 different densities, every time you flip this thing over, will form 20 or 30 or 40 or sometimes 100 layers, because water automatically sorts things by density, but not strict density. There's a lot of factors involved in sorting. You can buy these at Walmart in our country for $10. So the sorting would happen. Clams are generally found at the bottom of the so-called geologic column. There is no geologic column, by the way. There's a bunch of layers of rock, which all formed during Noah's flood. You guys would love to say, well, the top layer is younger than the bottom layer. I say, really? Where'd the top layer come from? Outer space? None of the layers are different ages. They're all on the earth at the same time. All of them. They got reshuffled during the flood. Petrified trees in the standing position. You said they came in a swamp. This is absolutely ludicrous. This is not true. There are thousands of petrified trees that have been found standing up, connecting all these different layers. There's me by one in Yellowstone. Yellowstone has a whole forest of them standing up, petrified trees in the vertical position. A friend of mine in North Alabama is a manager of a coal mine there. Let me get the pictures here. Petrified trees standing up. There's a coal mine right up here in central North Alabama. There is my friend, Mr. McDonald. They have trees. They're digging the coal out of there, mining it. He said, Kent, we find them all the time. Petrified trees standing up, coming from one seam of coal, through layers of rock, through the next seam of coal. He sent me the sample. He said, we get sample A, B, C, D. We have the Blue Creek Formation, the Mary Lee Formation. And he said, you can put together sample A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H. And I can prove to you very clearly that those layers of coal had to form at the same time or within a few months of each other, because tree A comes out of the Blue Creek Formation and goes to here. This tree starts in a layer below this and goes up through the Mary Lee. You guys like to say these coal seams have to form, a forest has to grow, has to get compressed into coal, new layers deposited on top for millions of years, and then another forest grows and it gets compressed to coal. And yet there are 27 consecutive layers of seams in Yellowstone with trees, petrified trees standing up, penetrating all of them. Here's one tree, a 30-foot petrified tree, going through a seam of coal at the bottom, a bunch of rock, and then a seam of coal at the top. This is in Tennessee. These are found all over the world. And you guys just cannot give up on the idea that your geologic column is dumb. It doesn't exist. We just made in 4 minutes, probably 40 layers right here in front of you, out of 4 different densities of sand. So I don't think you have a clear grasp of how hydrologic sorting works. Here's a petrified tree in Tennessee. I was just up there 2 days ago. I didn't get to go see them, but I was in the area where they find these all over the place. Petrified trees standing up. These are not growing in swamps. Goggins, Nova Scotia has hundreds of these trees growing through multiple layers of rock. There's one right here, Goggins, Nova Scotia, all along the beach. They find there's part of it, the rest fell out of the middle. Petrified trees in the standing position. So whoever told you they were growing out of swamps lied to you. That is not true. And these layers of rock had to form rapidly, and layers can form rapidly. We show that very clearly with a little toy here you can buy at Walmart for $10. Come visit our science center at Dinosaur Adventureland in Lenox, Alabama, and we'll show you all kinds of cool science experiments that will document if the flood story is correct. But in Goggins, Nova Scotia, they show the tree penetrating all these layers and put a sign up that this is 300 million years old from the Carboniferous era, which is absolute pure propaganda. That is not true. These layers had to form rapidly. What did I not get to? You're going to pick one I didn't answer here. They're all over the same kind, you mentioned. Excuse me. Now, the warblers on opposite sides, the ring species, are still the same kind. They're still a bird. They're still a warbler. Give me an example where this ring species example you're talking about can change it to what anybody, what a 5-year-old would consider a different kind. Petrified tree standing up. I've got enough stuff to go forever on this. Okay. Let's see, my time up. How much time do I have?
30 seconds.
30 seconds, that's what I thought. Okay. As far as carbon dating, potassium argon dating, rubidium strontium, lead 208, lead 206, anyone you want to pick, let's do a separate debate on that. But any dating method is based on the obvious assumption that you know the initial content. You can't possibly know that. You know it's never been contaminated. You can't possibly know that. You know there's no way to speed up or slow down the decay rate, which we know can easily, under heat and pressure, the decay rates can be changed radically. If taken potassium to argon, which takes 1.3 billion years, under heat and pressure, done it in 4 seconds. I think you're grossly mistaken about all that, but go ahead.
Finally, we get to the back and forth. Finally. See, can't see any questions in the chat, so I'll keep it going. But if you have got anything, just tag us in and want to bring anything up.
All right.
Jared,
So-
Jared, the links.
Yep. And before we continue back with the open discussion, the back and forth portion of this, we do have the links at.
I think we can hear some kids in the background of this. Like every now and then, I'm hearing like young children. I think he's actually got an audience in front of him doing this.
Where are they currently located, Marvel?
In the chat. Both are being shilled out by our mods, our lovely mods. Thank you.
Our amazing, wonderful moderators.
They're great.
That they are, which it is to benefit, for those who are unaware, the Bacon God, otherwise known as they and them, TNT, the wonderful purveyor of cured meat. And because of the movement, let me go ahead and get that back set up. There we go. All right, now that we have
Back and forth.
the back and forth, which feel free to answer each other's questions more directly at this point, and we will also be interjecting a couple questions that we noticed that came up from the live chat at the same time as well.
Cool. Can I start? Is that okay? Or Ken, do you want to?
Go for it.
Oh, cheers. Right. I would like one of my slides up again. Can we get that graph up again, Jared, from before?
Just wanting to have fun there, Catz, huh?
Sorry, mate. Sorry, buddy. So, I mean, Ken, you said a lot in this is obviously the Q&A, the back and forth, so I'm not going to address everything you've said. But I will in a video following this debate, which you can have a go at debunking on your channel. But I want to talk about the radioactive dating. You said that you can't possibly know whether something's been contaminated or not. Now, you used to be a science teacher, right? We're going to go through a little bit of science for you now. And I don't want you just to say that doesn't prove. I want you to explain. After I've explained what isochrone dating is, I want you to explain to me what the flaw is in it. Okay? So, with isochrone dating, so let's take potassium argon. You're familiar with that. I've heard you talk about that before, yeah?
Yes, sir.
And we both know that the potassium decays into argon if more of the parent isotope contaminates the sample. That's going to affect the age. It's going to make it look younger. And if more of the daughter isotope contaminates the sample, it's going to make it look older. We're happy with that, yeah?
Assuming, assuming you know the initial content, assuming you know the rate has not changed and cannot be affected by anything, and assuming there's no contamination, you still have the same built-in assumptions. But yes, go ahead.
And okay, and there we go. So there are, if we were to just use potassium argon and we had no idea what the initial starting points were, etc. And there are some things that there are some certain rocks that we can, especially with argon being such an inert, only reacts under very, very certain circumstances. There are materials that we can. But let's look at isochrone dating. If we have a look here, these three dots on the graph represent different minerals within a rock. This is how isochrone dating works. And what we do in each of those minerals is, you can see I've put on the graph, we look at two different ratios, right? If we have potassium and argon, we know that the isotope of argon that is produced by the radioactive decay of potassium is different to the most common isotope of argon, all right? I'm sure you'll accept that. That's not open for debate. I'm sure you'll accept that the isotope of argon produced by decay is different to the stable isotope. So what that tells us is, we can look at two ratios. If you look at the graph here on the y-axis, we can look at the ratio of the daughter isotope as it's being produced. So the daughter isotope.
Thank you very much, Stephen, for that. Thank you. Really, really appreciate it. It's very, very kind of you. Thank you very much. And he wasn't prepared for that. We've not got to my favorite bit yet, where he can't explain what an allele is. And I remember when he's using these terms, it took me so long to click, because I never spoke to him before. I didn't know a lot about him. It took me so long to click on that he didn't understand these basic terms. I wish I had my chance again, but thank you for that, Stephen.
As it's produced by the potassium decay. And we can look at the ratio of that against the isotope, the stable isotope, if you like, that would have been in the rock in the first place. Now, it doesn't matter how much of that there is, because we're just looking at a ratio at the second. If we look at that x-axis, we can also look at the ratio of the parent isotope, which is going to be potassium, and the daughter isotope, which is argon. Now, why is this relevant? Well, as the potassium decays into argon, and I'm plucking these numbers out my backside here, excuse me, but let's say we get 10 grams
I'm going to be
of
doing
made in a
more
certain
of
mineral.
that.
Okay, that's going to affect both.
I'm not going to, I'll let this play a little bit, but I am going to be doing more flat earthing, but I left it because all I ever did on the Conspiracy Catz channel was flat earth, and it was what everybody wanted. And I didn't feel as if I could make enough videos, and I wanted to do other things. And I just thought best to give it to somebody who's going to use it for flat earth debunking. But I've set my stall out on this channel that I do all sorts. So I can do a flat Earth video a month without being pigeonholed back into it. And I can do the chat box travels without being pigeonholed back into it. So I am going back to my old style of content. Just flat Earth may be like, 1 in every 5, something like that.
Has to have been a closed system if those lines, if those things produce a straight line, regardless of the starting amount, right? Regardless of anything, it has been a closed system because as one amount of argon has been produced, the other isotope, the other ratio gets affected in the same amount. If contamination occurs, they will not produce a straight line. Now, the isochron dating, when we look at the gradient of the graph, the steeper the graph, the older the rock, and we draw our age of the rock from the gradient of the line. So this isn't your normal, or let's just have a look at how much potassium there is, let's have a look at how much argon there is, and maybe there's been some contamination. I want you to tell me where, if we're using these and they fall on a straight line, where is the flaw in that? I know you mentioned that the rate of decay can sometimes change, but you know as well as I know that decay rates only change under spectacular conditions, like you might find in a star or something like that. Okay, spectacular conditions. So can you just tell me the flaw that's in this?
Oh, are you going to give me equal time to do all that?
Absolutely.
Okay. Well,
Please address isochron dating and the flaw in it.
Is my microphone on? Okay. On my video number 7, I give a very long answer to that if people would like to watch that. But you need to understand all of these dating methods, all of
Thank you, Rosina. Have I pronounced that right? Rosina. Thank you very, very much for that. And yeah, I think you're right. I don't think he does know it's a gas at all. But thank you.
All of them. Potassium, argon. Argon's a gas. It disappears very quickly. All of these dating methods were really just invented in the last 60 or 70 years. The dating is actually done by the geologic column. Let me get this here, 380. The geologic column, invented in 1830 by Charles Lyell and others who worked on this, does not exist anywhere in the world except in the textbooks. It's true there are layers. This guy admitted it back in 1976, American Journal of Science. Radiometric dating would not have been feasible if the geologic column had not been erected first. The first thing they do, if you take a sample and to have it potassium argon dated or carbon dated or any kind of dating method, the first thing they do is
showing me some love.
Where did you find it?
Tell him thank you.
What difference does that make where I found it? Well, they have to know what strata it came out of so they can bracket the date so they know if the answer they're getting is too high or too low based on the geologic column. Apart from, let's see, ever since William Smith at the beginning of the 19th century, fossils have been and still are the best and most accurate method of dating and correlating.
Right. FTFE seems to have sent some people over midway through his stream. It's very nice of you all to be here. I know you're watching the final experiment stream on FTFE's channel, which I'm going to join when this one's finished. So, yes, I think he's being dead nice because I ended my stream the other day when he was doing his press-up challenge, which was for charity. It was a big thing. So I ended my stream so people would go over and watch it. So I think he's being nice, and this is his way of saying thanks, but it's very kind. So when you pop back over there, you can say, I appreciate it massively. And I am bald.
Hitting the rocks in which they appear. Apart from very modern examples, I can think of no cases of radioactive decay being used to date fossils. Interesting.
Thank you.
Most of our Earth's atmosphere is within about 10 miles of the surface of the Earth. I think most people would agree with that. 99% of the air is within that 10 miles. And it contains a variety of gases, mostly nitrogen, 78%, 21% oxygen, a little bit of carbon. And we can go through carbon dating, but you didn't want to do that one. You want to do potassium argon. If you walked into a room and found a candle burning on a table and I asked you the simple question, when was it lit? You say, I don't know. Well, let's do some empirical science. This is an analogy. We find a fossil, it has some potassium, has some argon. We can tell exactly how many molecules of each. No question. When was it lit?
I was live on his stream. Oh, hang on. Oh, I might. I don't know if I'm still live on his stream. That's really. That's if I am. Hi, everybody over there. He says, "Don't do it again." Thank you, Spoony Spoon. Oh man. Oh, for God's sake! Right. This is well, Spoony Spoon. That was very nice. Bob Tosh. Thank you so much for that. I'm gonna have to thank FTFE. It's very, very nice of him. He's a star. But thank you very much.
Well, we can measure the height of the candle and say that candle is 7 inches tall. We can also measure the rate of burn and say it's burning an inch an hour. Now, when was it lit? Well, I don't know. We still have to make some assumptions. How tall was it? Has it always burned at the same rate? Those are two things we could not possibly prove. When you find a fossil in the dirt, in the so-called geologic column, you can measure the amount of potassium or argon or carbon-14 or anything you want, but that's all you can determine. The rate it's currently decaying at and how much is currently in it.
Right,
In a court of law, none of those dates would hold up. In an honest court of law, none of them would hold up. Let me get the potassium argon 449 here, 449. Radioactive dating failure. There's thousands of examples where it has absolutely failed, where they get the wrong dates. Potassium decays to argon in 1.3 billion years. Planetary Sciences Abstract, 48th annual meeting, back whatever the date on that was, as much as 80% of the potassium in a small sample of iron meteorite can be removed by distilled water in 4.5 hours. So you put the meteorite in distilled water in 4.5 hours, half the potassium is gone.
Thank you, Ron.
Greatly throw off your date. Because again, like I said, you cannot prove the initial content.
Thank you very much.
The rate has remained constant. Here's Canadian Journal of Earth Science. In conventional interpretation of potassium argon age data, it's common to discard ages which are substantially too high or too low compared to the rest of the group or with other available data, such as the geologic column. The KBS tuff, K. Brensenmeyer tuff layer of ash, named for K. Brensenmeyer, was dated using potassium argon dating. This is from Nature magazine back 40 years ago, and also mentioned in National Pornographic back in 1985. They took a skull that.
Sorry, did he just say National Pornographic? I'm just going to skip back 5 seconds. Listen out to it. It sounds to me like he's saying National Pornographic. Let's have a listen.
Name for K. Brensenmeyer was dated using potassium argon dating. This is from Nature magazine back 40 years ago, and also mentioned in National Pornographic back in 1985. From Nature magazine back 40 years ago, and also mentioned in National Pornographic back in 1985.
National Pornographic, yeah.
They took a skull that they found, KNMR.
Can someone help me out? What the hell is National Pornographic? Oh my God. Tube spanner, that is unbelievably generous. Unbelievably generous. I don't know what else to say other than that is unbelievably generous. Thank you so much. And FTFE says hi. I mean, FTFE, what a guy. What a guy. Don't really know what else to say. But thank you for that. And thanks to FTFE for sending some people over to say hi. I just really appreciate that. Thank you.
1470 is found in 1972 by Richard Leakey in the
He
KBS
said National
tuff. It
Pornographic.
looked like modern humans, but they gave it a date of 2.9 million years. Why? Because of the geologic column. Later, they took 10 samples of tuff and material from this KBS tuff, and it got numbers from 0.5 to 2.6 million years. Well, that's way down from 212, where it should have been. But even that is a 500% error. Is it 0.5 or 2.6? So my point would be to get radical numbers.
This is a great question, and also most people know You Are Mocked. He's got a channel bigger than mine, and he's interviewed all the big people in the community, and he's also interviewed me. So I'm sure you'll know him. But if not, go and check out You Are Mocked. He's brilliant. I'm a big fan, and he does some fantastic interviews and other things as well. But his manner, the way he speaks to people, is brilliant. Yeah, big fan of You Are Mocked. Do you think Kent believes what he's saying, or do you think he's just grifting at this point? I'm going to hold my hand up. Honestly, a lot of people in the chat might disagree with me here. I honestly think he believes what he's saying in maybe not the fine detail. I think he knows when he's doing these debates, he's riding his luck and making some things up to, shave the edges off because he doesn't really know. But I think when it comes to the wider concept, I think he does believe in young earth creationism. He just perhaps doesn't take the time to properly educate himself, but thank you for that. And thank you, Mr. Toffees. Thank you so much. And my goodness. Dora, that is lovely. Thank you very much. National Pornographic. He definitely said that. I'm going to have to clip that and use that in the future. I've watched this, 2 or 3 times after the original debate to make my summary video on it. I've not seen it since then. And I never once picked out, he said, National Pornographic. That is hilarious. Thank you.
It is not an exact science like you're trying to portray to your listeners. George Buffon said the Earth is 70 million years old. That was back in 1770. In 1905, you can look up the old magazines. They'll say, the Earth is 2 billion years old. When they went to the moon, 1969, all the newspapers said the Earth is 3.5 billion years old. I was a teenager when that happened. It's 3.5 billion years, the age of the Earth. Today, they're telling the students it's 4.6. The Earth is getting older at 21 million years per year. That's 40 years per minute. You talk about your speciation. So wild dates are obtained. Potassium argon from Mount Etna in Sicily erupted in 122 BC, gave a potassium argon age of 250 million years. Excuse me, it's 2000. It's wrong. Lava from from the Hawaiian volcano erupted 1801. The potassium argon, which is usually used on lava or tuff or something.
I understand that, Dean. I imagine a lot of people will.
Date of 1.6 million years.
I understand my take on it might be a bit controversial.
lava. That's 1968. Is it getting better? 1999, they took lava from Mount Kilauea Iki in Hawaii, erupted in 1959, gave a potassium argon age of 8.5 million years. It's wrong. It didn't work. There are too many variables. Basalt from Mount Etna in Sicily, 1964, it erupted, gave a potassium argon age of 700,000 years. It erupted again in 1972, gave an age of 350 years. Mount St. Helens erupted. We saw it happen in 1980, and it gave ages anywhere from 350,000 to 2.8 million. 5 different laboratories dated it. So when you consider potassium argon dating, a rock of known age doesn't work. It doesn't work when you know the age. If you take a rock of unknown age, it is assumed to work. This is hocus pocus, SpongeBob fairy tale, imagination stuff. I'm sorry, Al, you're wrong. Potassium argon age doesn't work, okay? Wild dates are obtained all the time. Potassium leaks out of the system easily. So does argon leak out easily. It's a gas. It leaks out very easily. Dates that don't fit the evolution theory are rejected and not published. That's what happens. It's based on the assumptions that the original content can be known, that the decay rate never changes, that the sample's never been contaminated. I'm sorry, it's not something anybody would put real science in. There's a good book by Larry Vardaman and some scientists who talk about creationists, who talk about radioisotopes and the great problems they have at ICR.org. So they do a whole section on isochron dating. I'd recommend you go there. All right, plenty of time. Next question.
Okay, right. Well, I'm going to stick with that one because I can't begin to.
Thanks, FTFE, for thanking me for thanking
So I'm going to
you.
address the question again because I'm not going to let you dodge it and get around it because you didn't answer the question. The question was very specific. Jerry, can we get that graph back on the screen again, please, if that's okay, sir? The question was very specific. I asked you if you understood the significance of those 3 minerals plotting a straight line on the graph. You said you did, and then you started to talk about anything but isochron dating. Now, let's just address the radioactive dating that give false readings that you suggested. There's an error of about 3 million years.
I just want to thank FTFE for thanking me for thanking him.
With potassium argon dating. So if something is aged at 750,000 years old and really it's only a couple of hundred years old, etc., that's within the error. And we don't use potassium argon dating for things that are that young because of that reason. We don't take those readings seriously. So you can use them, but they are within the error. It's down to something called ion drift. And I'll be honest, I don't fully understand ion drift. But this I do understand. And I'm going to highlight this again because you told me you understood the significance and then you showed everybody
Thank you, Bob,
that
for that.
Totally had no idea what the significance of this was. So let's do this again. On that y-axis, the daughter isotope is going to be the argon on the y-axis, the one
Very
at the
much
top.
appreciated.
That is the
And
argon
FTFE,
produced
thank
as the
you very
potassium
much.
decays. Below that, the one that we're dividing it by, getting the ratio.
Sorry. These are all very generous. I'm having to stop the debate for this, but FTFE, thank you. Thank you, Bob. And Rosina, did I get that right last time? Because argon, yeah, exactly. Brilliant. And thank you, CJ, as well. FGFE says thanks for thanking. Well, thank him for thanking. I'm lost now. I'm lost where I am. Bloody hell. And thank you, PJ, as well. Thank you, CJ, and PJ. Thank you very much. And BM. I missed that one. Did I miss that one? Is he arguing that material that comes out from eruption should be the same? I think he is. I think he is. But I think with if I remember correctly, the material from the volcano that he was talking about that was carbon dated, and I've kind of got lost track a little bit on the debate. So apologies if I'm not actually referencing the debate here. But he did talk about labs using radioactive dating to measure, was it from Mount St. Helens, like a rock, and it come back 3 million years old, but actually the rock itself, the eruption was on like less than 100 years before, something like that. I can't quite remember the detail, but he didn't leave in that the lab that actually did the dating had an error of plus or minus 3 million years with the technique they were using, because the technique is designed to date something from like millions and millions and millions of years ago. So it came back as being 3 million years old within that, because of the error range. He's very, very dishonest. Right. Sorry. I think we're done, or perhaps not yet, but thank you. Man of War. Thank FGFE for thanking you, for thanking him, for thanking you, for thanking him, for thanking you. This is getting silly now, but FGFE, well, thank you, Man of War, very much for that. Thank you. And thank you, FTFT. Just thank you, FTFT. I think I've lost my thread. I'll get back to the debate, but thank you very much, mate. Thank you. Really appreciate it. Super nice guy. Thank you so much. And all of you, thank you.
Against is the isotope of argon that is already in that mineral when it starts. And we're just looking at a ratio. On the x-axis, we have the potassium on the top. and we have the argon that it decays into on the bottom. Now, the important thing is, as the potassium decays, a certain amount of the daughter isotope will be made, and that will affect both ratios in the same way.
Thank you, Spider Ranchula. Chili Ghost Windmill. Thank you very much. NG showed topless natives, so N equals pornography. He definitely said it. He definitely said
as long as the system is closed. If the system is not closed, we will never get a straight line on this graph. The system has to be closed. You're a clever guy. You're a scientist. You've been a science teacher.
We'll get back to this debate in a minute, but I have to thank everybody that's done this. Simon, thank you so much for that. Just to reiterate, if you are gifted a membership, if you do receive one, if you look on the membership tab, there'll be a video that says how to access the Discord, the members only Discord server. It's a 20-second process, right? It's not intuitive, but if you watch the video, it becomes very simple. You just follow what's on the video, and it's really quick and easy. And then you'll be into the members only Discord server. Everybody in there will just be a channel member. And obviously there's other bits and bobs that come out, like vlogs for members and stuff like that. And you get early release on videos. So anyone that's got one of those memberships that's been gifted, check that out. Thank you, Simon.
You must understand that we would only get a straight line across all these minerals if that was a closed system. The production of the daughter isotope of argon is going to affect both ratios in the same way, unless it's not a closed system, in which case we don't get a straight line.
Thank you,
we do
Byron.
not use isochrone dating. We
so
do not
much,
take
mate.
results seriously.
Really,
we
really
don't go any
appreciate
further
that.
if they do not produce a straight line.
And thank you, FT.
Do you
FT.
understand the significance of the line being straight? Because I think that's the problem, because you started talking about carbon dating before when I asked you that, and you dodged this question. And we're going to have an honest debate, and I'll answer any question you want. I won't dodge it. But can we make this a standing point that you are either going to be honest and say you don't know, or you're going to explain to me the significance of it? And I'll do that to any question you want to ask me as well. I'll be honest and say I don't know, or I'll explain it to you. But please don't dodge the question like you've been doing for a lot of the night, to be honest. Please stick to this point and explain to me that you understand the significance of this being a straight line.
Thanks,
and
Sydney. I didn't
why,
realise
if it
that.
is a straight line, we cannot take it seriously.
I do not understand how that can possibly be used to demonstrate something that's billions of years old. What do these lines on this paper represent? Is this a percentage of the ratio of potassium to argon? Is it a time scale factor? What is the decay rate of potassium to argon? And again, how do you know it's been a closed system for 1.3 billion years? How could you possibly know that? Which is
So
my point. To answer the question, you cannot tell it's never been contaminated. You cannot tell it's a closed system.
Yeah, we can. And that's because we understand the significance of ratios. When the rock is formed, we reset the starting clock, if you like, when the rock is formed. You know, you understand that. Yeah. So when the rock...
I'm going to be honest, right? When I did my Nathan Thompson debate with you, there was, I brought the P wave and S wave argument, the seismic wave argument, and I said it was a stupid argument to bring because Nathan Thompson was never going to understand it. And I think probably looking back, I only brought it because I knew he wasn't going to understand it. And I thought, there you go, take that, which wasn't a clever thing to do. It was a childish thing to do. And I shouldn't have brought that. And this argument here, if you've never heard of it before, and I didn't know what Kent Hovind knew and what Kent Hovind didn't know. So I wasn't 100% convinced that he'd never heard of it before. I thought he might have done. But still, to be able to actually explain it properly with a crappy graph like that, as much as Kent struggled, to be fair, I've got to be hard on myself here. I'm not giving a great explanation of it. I think I did a much better job in a recent debate with T-Rock over on Standing for Truth channel. But yeah, this was not a good explanation by me.
There will be some argon that hasn't been produced by potassium decay in the rock, right? There'll be argon that has existed there before. There will be some argon being produced by the decay of potassium. Now, as that ratio of potassium and its own daughter isotope changes, because we're creating that daughter isotope, that daughter argon, therefore, the ratio of the argon produced by potassium and the other isotope of argon that was there to start with will change in the same way. So, for example, if I lose 10 grams, if I lose 10 grams of potassium or produce 10 grams of argon from potassium decay, then that 10 grams is going to affect the other ratio by the same amount. All right, they're going to be proportional. They will not be proportional. They will not show a straight line if there has been contamination. Now, if you're saying you don't understand this, you don't understand what this means, that's fine. We can talk about this another time. But just be honest and say you don't understand isochrone dating if you've never done it before. Because I'm not expecting you to be an expert on everything. If you've never done isochrone dating before, just tell me you've never done it and you don't know it, and we'll move on. That's not a problem. But if you're saying that false, if you're saying that it's false and it's flawed, I'm going to push you, and I'm going to push you, I'm going to push you on it to explain why. So it's your
Rosina, we did set up a second debate, and he didn't turn up. And this was on a Marvel Girls channel, and a Marvel Girl did the chasing up for that debate, and she was speaking to his assistant, etc. And it just fell dead. I think he accused me of interrupting him too much. And I know I'm speaking fast, and I'm bombarding him, maybe, which again is another fault of mine. You know, I'll be honest, I've had my own criticisms, but I don't think I interrupted him. But still, yeah, he won't debate me. Although I would love to debate him again. Oh, shit. I've missed that. Right. Okay.
Into similar layers just because of their body density. Once they die, they're going to be sorted by density.
Well, that's good.
There
There we go. Hang on. Let's get to the end of Icecron dating.
To respond, Kent.
Let's just get to the end of that and go to when Kent starts speaking. Oh no. Let's go from here.
You know, from the fossils right at the very top, as we dig deeper and deeper and deeper down that tree that we put together, we know that the genetics holds
He's
it
got a
together
PhD, but
perfectly,
it's not from a proper
right? So
university,
we know
I
the
don't
genetic
think.
analysis is really important. But you wouldn't address the genetics.
So
you just skipped
technically,
over that and
maybe,
you wouldn't talk about it.
it can be
which
called
is why
a
I wanted to
doctor,
put the
but-
stuff. So if you want my best evidence, we've got the fossil record backed up by fantastic genetic analysis. So should we talk about ERVs or ubiquitous genes? Do you want to talk about maybe debunking ERVs? If you want to keep it on genetic. But I haven't heard any evidence for creation at all. I've heard some, maybe the water might slosh around arguments. Maybe the tigers chase the kangaroos. You know, I've heard that. Maybe the kangaroos are scared of tigers. So give me some science, right?
Let's give him the opportunity to respond. Kent, would you like to do a brief response about the genetic evidence that Catz did begin to touch on?
Well, I would certainly point out that if there are genetic similarities between different creatures, that is an example of a common designer. I think all the Microsoft Word programs, I bet Microsoft PowerPoint has thousands of identical lines of code to Microsoft Word because the same guys are writing the code. I bet if I go to Microsoft PowerPoint and click spell check on a word, it takes me to the exact same dictionary as if I'm typing in Microsoft Word. That's not evidence they both evolved from Morse code. It's evidence the same guys are designing it. So if there are similar genes in different animals, I think that's an example of the same designer wrote the code. To make these animals are unbelievably complex. A flea is more complex than the space shuttle. And so the most complex thing ever, a single flea is more complex than the entire city of Manchester, England, where you live. All the infrastructure, the water structure, the electrical structure, the sewer system, the street system.
He's a prick for that. I'm only kidding. But back before the debate started, I said, he said, like, where are you from, etc. And I said, well, I'll tell you, but I don't want people knowing because at the time I was still full-time teaching. And I said, the last thing I want are, you know, flat earthers or creationists getting angry and turning up at the school where I teach, you know, putting the safeguarding of the kids at risk. I said, that would just be a nightmare. So, you know, I don't want it coming out on camera where I live. So I said, I live, you know, near Manchester. I didn't give him too much detail. And obviously, rather than calling me Catz, he's called me Al from Manchester. Timo, thank you so much, mate. Thank you for that again. Yes, we're going to do that. We're going to do a members chess competition. I'll get it set up. We'll stream it if any members are ready over Christmas. And then everybody can watch it. That'd be absolutely amazing. Thank you, Timo, very much. Kent got his doctorate from an uncredited Bible college. Ah, yes, of course he did. It was a mobile home. That was it. I think I've seen a picture of it. Yes, thank you for that, Rodent. Thank you.
Everything. None of that pales in comparison to a flea.
Come on,
the
Clive.
Complexity of a single cell is more complex than the whole country of England. And yet you want me to believe that because there are ERVs that look like they have similar things, or there's a genetic code that looks similar, therefore this is indication of evolution? No, this is indication of an amazingly smart designer, and he ought to get the glory for his creation. The reason clams are found at the bottom of the geologic column is clams are already at the bottom when the flood starts. That's where they live. I think the animals are sorted in the so-called geologic column based upon habitat. The birds are found on top because birds die last in a flood. They're sorted based upon mobility. Clams can't run very fast. They're sorted based upon intelligence. Clams aren't too bright. They're sorted based on body density. A clam, pound for pound, or grams per cubic centimeter, is more dense than a bird, grams per cubic centimeter. So I think the sorting, you look up the body density of reptiles. It is different than the body density of mammals. That would automatically sort them into similar layers just because of their body density. Once they die, they're going to be sorted by density. Buy one of these for $10 for heaven's sake, and you can learn some science about how things sort things by density. So I don't think there's any evidence for evolution. And finding them in some kind of order in a column of rock, when I point out the columns cannot, the ages cannot be, layers cannot be different ages. There's trees connecting them. And even if you find them in certain layers, all that indicates is they died. You couldn't prove they had any children at all. No fossils are going to count in a court of law. as evidence for anything, for evolution, other than it died. You can't prove a single fossil found in the textbooks had children that lived. Not a single one could it be proven that had children that lived that were different. Why would you think a fossil in the dirt could do something that no animal today can do? Every animal today produces children that are just like itself, the same, obviously same kind. But yet you think bones in the dirt could do something that animals today can't do. I don't understand why you have such faith in such a dumb theory like that.
Well, I'm not going to be dragged into the straw man argument that you always use, you know, because everybody knows that evolution, and you've done over 200 debates, you know that evolution doesn't say that, you know, something's going to produce, like an elephant is going to give birth to a pine tree. You know, you know that. So the fact that you're using that argument to me says that maybe you're getting a little bit desperate. But anyway, let's go back to the ERVs, because I do think that you've missed the significance again. So let me just explain, then you can tell me whether you understand the significance or not, and then we can move on. But we'll do one point at a time, like you said. An ERV isn't just about us having the same 4 bases that make up our DNA and then saying, well, there you go, we're made up of the same instructions. An ERV is an insertion that can happen in your genetics at any point, at any time. You could have an endogenous retrovirus in you now that will give some of its DNA and place it right in yours. And it could place it in one of 50 million places. Now, if that happens to be in a cell that produces sperm and you father another child, then that child will have that ERV insertion in exactly that 1 in a 50 million place. Now, your parents won't have it, your grandparents won't have it, none of your ancestors will have it. But your children from this point forward, and your whole lineage from this point forward, will have it in that random place. It can be inserted at any point. Now, when we look at humans, for example, and we trace back, and we go, you know, I'm not going to all the way back to Afarensis or whatever. We're not going to go to the family tree. But when we trace back, we can see the ERV insertions, and we can map them against the fossil records, and we see that they match perfectly. These 1 in a 50 million chances. And as we start to climb up that tree, we can see the point where a new insertion is made, and that 1 in a 50 million place insertion is then passed on to all the offspring after that. And then if the new insertion is made, that 1 in a 50 million chance insertion is passed on to the offspring after that. It seems to me that you're kind of hand-wave dismissing the significance of it being a 1 in a 50 million chance place. And you're just saying, oh, it's just made up of A, T, C, and G. Microsoft use zeros and ones. You're not even showing that you accept it's a significant thing. Right? Can you address it properly?
Yeah, I think let's do ERV in a separate debate. I'm not prepared for that.
Hey!
Several possible answers to that.
Sorry, got to listen to that. We all know why we came, and I think I skipped past one when I lost my thing before, but we're all here for this.
Even showing that you accept it's a significant thing, right? Can you address it properly?
Yeah, I think let's do ERV in a separate debate. I'm not prepared for that.
Right? Can you address it properly?
Yeah, I think let's do ERV in a separate debate. I'm not prepared for that.
I'm not prepared for that. That's what we came for.
Answers to that. I agree that, but see, this is a change in the code. This is like finding a typographical error in a book that is then repeated for every generation after that. But I think you're missing the significance of this is so minor to say that this, first of all, you did point out, whether you realize it or not, that this is dependent on the geologic column. Let's say 3, 4, 4. Okay. The textbooks do teach, and I have it right beside me here, hundreds of them, that the humans and the spiders and the mollusks and the worms have a common ancestor. They draw lines on paper that say we all came from a protista, protozoa, or some other single-celled animal. This is what's being taught to the children, that the whale and the mosquito and the cactus are related. And your evidence for that is because we have inserted DNA code from an ERV, and you're basing this on the geologic column again, that this somehow means something for when they live. There's the problem. All of the strata were formed at the same time during Noah's flood. The layers are not different ages. All the animals lived at the same time. They died at the same time and probably got sorted by hydrologic sorting. Animals would automatically be sorted based upon their body density in the flood, or based upon how long they lived before they died. Maybe they could flee the flood for a few months. Insects wouldn't be included on Noah's Ark at all. Insects survive just fine on a floating log mass or dead carcasses.
Racina, I used to have a channel called Conspiracy Cats, which I did this debate. I was under that name when I did this debate, and it must have been about, was it 4 years ago, guys? I can't remember. I'll have to have a look. So it is an old one. It is an old one. And then he wouldn't debate me after that. Then I gave the channel away. I started this one. Then I took a year out. So it's been quite some time. But I do know that after this debate, though, he did speak to Matt Powell, because I made a follow-up video. And he was like, Matt Powell, what do you think about this ERV argument? And Matt Powell, at the beginning of that call, honestly said, well, I'd never heard about them until this morning. And then he says, but the obviously evidence for creation, you know, he'd not heard about them until that morning. He'd suddenly become a massive expert in a couple of hours. And knew their evidence for creation. The guy is a legend. PhD Tony in the house, absolute legend. I'm hoping to get Senator Jared Rennick, for those who followed the videos that I've made, an actual Australian senator has agreed to debate me in response to a video I made about some silly things he said. And I've got to give him the chance for right to reply. If he says, no, if he says it has to be me because I made the video about him, then it's going to have to be me. But if not, PhD Tony, you will be the ideal person to rip him apart. You really would. It will be brilliant.
They could go any place where there's been a flood. When the water goes down, walk out into the mud, and you'll see insects by the bazillions. So God told Noah to bring onto the ark those in whose nostrils is the breath of life on dry land. Noah didn't bring fish. He didn't bring insects. And the sorting that you're relying on this geologic column. And there's the problem. And you're relying on some scientists publishing this in a peer-reviewed magazine that won't publish it if it doesn't match the geologic column. Go to North Korea, find me any articles published in any peer-reviewed journal that say communism doesn't work. So you can find me one like that. So I think you have a real prejudice against anybody speaks out against the geologic column or against evolution. Their stuff doesn't get published. So you can't claim majority opinion or it's in a publisher. I won't buy that for a second. Common sense tells me when I see lava tested from a volcano and it gives the wrong age, why won't they publish that? Give the wrong age. Destroys your potassium argon.
Actually, that goes to a question that did come to mind myself while I was listening to you earlier. The counter arguments to the radiological dating topic that Catz brought up, all your examples are a lava event, Kent?
That's generally what potassium argon dating is used on, because that resets the clock. A volcanic eruption, in theory, the lava would let the argon gas escape, so it should reset the clock. And I have to do
I have not,
Timo,
but it sounds like somebody I should do.
From decay and not from decay. How many isotopes of argon are there? I don't know. That's why I didn't do research on that. But I'm a little skeptic about his 2 lines on the paper to say we can tell which kind of argon came from where, and that there's been no contamination. But again, that wouldn't matter for the evolution debate. All that does is attempt to preserve the billions of years time frame that they need to imagine that evolution happened. We don't see any animal changing.
Well,
so I say thank you, Bob. That's very, very, very kind of you. Thank you so much. And again, thank you to FTFT for saying thank you. That's very, very kind. Thank you, Bob. I also want to say that this guy, I don't know if this guy debating is here on the screen, on the bottom left. Oh, I'm waving my mouse, but it's not showing for some reason. Yeah, the guy on the bottom left, he's got to tidy that bookshelf up behind him. I think he needs to get that tidied. That's quite embarrassing.
We don't see it changing. It doesn't happen. It's not science.
Well, I'm curious then, Kent, because if the time is a factor in the argument, wouldn't establishing how long something has been around be part of that argument in totality?
If you could establish that a rock has been around for billions of years, that again would be based on some very obvious assumptions. Here's a rock. How old is it? It's rounded off. It's gravel. I think this is going to tumble around. I bet it came from Noah's flood. I think you'll find great difficulties in establishing the age of things like this based upon different dating methods. And I showed you examples where it doesn't work. And in a court of law, it takes one example of it not working to throw it out. If there are 30 lines of evidence that said Timmy murdered his neighbor, but he can prove he wasn't in the
I gave it back to my daughter. It's hers.
He didn't murder the neighbor, whether DNA found at the scene or not. So one line of evidence that shows this method doesn't work is all that's required, especially since you guys want to require that all of us pay to have that talk to all of the kids. Go start a private school and teach evolution to anybody.
That is not part of the discussion, Ken. We are sticking with the actual facts. Let's not grandstand.
So it's 2 on 1 here today. This is great. Go ahead.
No.
Okay.
No, I'm actually offering you questions to try to further explain your position. I'm actually helping you out in this instance.
Jared, just ask a question.
Yeah, I know.
I didn't catch that last part. What's that?
I have questions now.
Yep. So we do have a couple questions, and let's actually, where has that it moved? We'll actually go to one that actually just recently started to touch upon the subject. This is for you, Ken. If there was a flood worldwide, how did freshwater fish live as well as the saltwater fish?
Excellent question. Keep in mind, this has nothing to do with evolution, and I'm not requiring my theory to be taught. But I believe during Noah's flood, it was all fresh water. Oceans are continually getting saltier every day right now. Mineral salts washing off the ground. Evaporation takes out just the water. There's a giant distillation process going on. And the oceans are about 3.6% salt, though that changes worldwide in various locations. Like the bay by Finland is fresh water and mixes with salt water. Anyway, so I think you'll see with the salt domes that are melting out from inside the earth, you find salt domes all over the world. Huge plumes of salt came from deep down in the crust of the earth. These salt domes are leaching into the ocean at various rates in various places because of their proximity to the water. But at the known rate of salinity increase, the oceans are getting saltier. They could have easily gone from 100% fresh water 4,400 years ago, and then the animals have had to learn to adapt to salt water. Today, there are saltwater bass and freshwater bass. They might have had a common ancestor called a bass, called a fish, okay? There are saltwater crocodiles and freshwater crocodiles, and they might have had a common ancestor called a crocodile. That does not prove mosquitoes and whales are related. So I think the saltwater, freshwater question is real tiny compared to the idea that fish came from a rock. I think that's a major thing you guys are completely overlooking, but you want everybody to believe that stuff. It's SpongeBob.
Everything come from a rock, Kent. Everything come from a rock.
Fresh water during the flood. It has gradually become salty in parts, oceans, and some animals have had to adapt to it. Most animals that live in salt water, it's a nuisance to them. You have to have some way of getting it out, filtering it out of their blood. Turtles excrete it through their eyes. Some have special kidneys to get rid of the salt. They excrete it through their urine. Most animals that do live in salt water, it's a nuisance. And they could be probably adapted back to fresh water over maybe a few decades or maybe over a few generations. A friend of mine had freshwater fish and saltwater fish aquarium in his house in Alabama. He slowly changed the salinity from 3.6 to 1.8 and lowered it in one, raised it in the other, and mixed all his fish together in 2 weeks. In 2 weeks, they adapted to 1.8 salinity. So I think that's so minor, though, compared to believing we all came from a rock. But go ahead.
All right. So, question for you, Conspiracy Cats. Could you possibly explain the mtDNA evidence, which is 99% similar worldwide? I believe is trying to say mitochondrial DNA, similar worldwide, 99%, pointing us back to one female ancestor just 6,000 years ago based on observed mutation rates.
Yeah, well, he's talking about mitochondrial Eve, and I'm sure you've heard of mitochondrial Eve, haven't you, Ken? Now, mitochondrial Eve is, first of all, if we're going to talk about, there's a few things to mention here. If we're going to talk about mitochondrial Eve being 6,000 years ago, it's important to understand, and first of all, that date's wrong, and I'll come to why in a second. But it's important to understand that mitochondrial Eve is not the first human female. She's a theoretical being that we can trace, if we could trace back through female lineage back to this one person, we would get to mitochondrial Eve. But she herself would have had peers. She would have had ancestors herself. So if she was 6,000 years old, she would have had 6,000 years ago. She would have had ancestors. So the Earth has to be older than 6,000 years anyway. Now this whole charade about mitochondrial Eve
I did not explain
only
that
6,000 years old came from a paper. Now what was the guy's name? Thomas Parsons, 1997. Now, Thomas Parsons, 1997, and his fellow scientists, I'll say, are creationists. And they wrote one paper where they looked at the mutation rate and found the mutation rate in mitochondrial DNA to be higher than we thought. And what they thought was, if the mitochondrial DNA mutation rate is higher, then maybe we can rejig.
Clive, I think that's what I was trying to explain, but I did such a poor job of it. Just listening to myself explain that. I just didn't explain that well at all. I didn't explain it well at all. But yes, mitochondrial Eve or Y chromosome, Adam, is just as far as we can get back. It is always going to be changing. So yeah, I did a bad job of that.
Big mitochondrial Eve, and they thought she's going to be 6,000 years ago. But I've had a look at that paper and I've read through it. And what you'll notice is some really severe sleight of hand in that paper. And anyone can Google it. Parsons et al., 1997. When you read it, they'll talk about grandmothers and mothers, and they'll talk about their grandchildren and their children. They won't talk about granddaughters and daughters. And the reason for that is they were including male offspring or hiding the fact that they were including male offspring. Now, what that means is because the mutations in the mitochondria are passed down the female line, the mutations in the male mitochondria get lost. But if you're including the male mitochondria in a selection of your research, then you're going to be including more mutations, but ones that aren't going to get passed on. So within any given generation, you can say, oh, the mutation rate is so much higher. But really, we know that we're taking the males out. You read that paper and you won't find the name. You won't find daughters or granddaughters. You'll find children and grandchild. And
I've no idea what I'm on about there. I can't remember any of that. Obviously, I've read it and I understood it at the time. I've absolutely no idea what I'm talking about.
it was one paper by one creationist.
He's a Chlorian Taff.
Kent, do you have an opinion on that source of information and the analysis of it? Oh, you're muted.
Okay.
There we go.
There. Okay. I've not read that paper. I'd be glad to read that. But I'd like to ask Al a question. He says he knows that this mitochondrial Eve had ancestors. How could you possibly know that? Would you agree that all humans could have come from one human woman? Or were there multiple ape-like ancestors that developed around the world? Or do all the humans come from one ancestor, a man and a woman? whether they were ape or monkey or chimpanzee or baboon, or common ancestor with them. Did evolution happen multiple
Big shout
times,
to
or just
8 out of 10
one
cats
time?
in
And we
the
all have, could all
chat.
humans be traced back to one couple? I guess
If you don't know, that's
Well, you
channel
you've done over 200
run
debates on
with
evolution.
Doom.
You say you should teach
That's where
evolution
we do
before
our
you teach
debates,
man in
or will
schools
be doing.
or something like that. You know the answer to that. You know what evolution is, and it's a change in the allele frequency in a population. You know what the answer to that is.
Oh, here we go. This is it. I thought I'd missed it. I thought I'd skip past it. This is the bit where it finally clicks that he doesn't know what the word allele means. This is the. I thought I might have accidentally skipped it before when I cocked up the stream.
So no, it's not a case of what comes first, the chicken or the egg. We had one female, and I'm not saying mitochondrial Eve is that person. She would be the person that we can theoretically track. Everybody back to down the female line, and there's an equivalent male one as well. Is it? I can't remember what he's called now. Is he the Y chromosome Adam or something like that? But they're not meant to be Adam and Eve. They're not meant to be the one male and female that started everything off at all. So yes, they would have had ancestors. They would have had someone to give birth to them, and that person would have had someone to give birth to them. I think that the thing with mitochondrial Adam and mitochondrial Eve, is calling her Eve and calling Adam Y chromosome Adam, because it gives the impression Adam and Eve are the first ones.
Okay, you completely dodged the question, Al. I asked you a simple question. Did all humans come from a common woman and man, regardless of what you call them? Do we have multiple human ancestors or one human pair of ancestors? Just don't dodge the question. Answer the question.
Well, like I said, we would have multiple ancestors. Evolution is a change of frequency in a population.
So there
allele frequency.
were a whole population of Eves and Adams or something that produced all the humans today. Are all the humans today interfertile? Are we the same kind?
Are humans today the same kind? I'm pretty sure we are.
Chinese, are they all interfertile? Would you consider Chinese and African American and Norwegian the same kind of? Are we still interfertile?
Is he going off on it? Just I'd not thought about this before. Is he leaning into some kind of nationalist, racist view when he's saying that I don't know about? Has he expressed those opinions in the past, or is he genuinely asking a scientific question?
You agree that if you go back in time, you had 2 parents, 4 grandparents, 8 grandparents. Eventually you reach a problem where there's 3 branches out, where it includes everybody in the world. Then you got to go backwards to a pyramid, coming back to 2 people. Were there 2 original humans or multiple original humans? How many original humans were there is my question.
Well, how big was the population in which the allele frequency changed over time? How big was that population?
I think we'll get to that later. I can't remember, Tony.
I don't know how big that population was. And I'd wish that you'd have said you have no idea what isochrone dating was, or you have no idea what ERPs are, rather than dodge it. I'm not going to dodge that. I don't know. We know what the theory of evolution is, and we know it's a change in allele population, the allele frequency in a population over time. So there would have been a population, but I don't know how big it is.
So evolution is a change in allele frequency. And do you understand how complex the DNA code is to start changing this? That's like saying a change in the Microsoft program that makes Microsoft PowerPoint. Little changes here and there are going to tweak it and turn it into an Apple program. It just doesn't happen. You're taking an unbelievably complex code and finding ways to tweak little changes and thinking this explains the origin of the code. It does not.
Well,
complex code that we're dealing with. You're trying to change little allele frequencies. This is like a spelling error in a
That's it. Where he said it there. I remember now. I remember being sat there when he said, you want to change allele frequencies. That's like a spelling error. It hit me as soon as he said that. This guy has absolutely no fucking clue what he is talking about. He's no idea what an allele is. And I remember sitting there thinking, did he just say that? I remember this really clear. And it's like a little light bulb went off my head. I was like, this moment, it's like when he threw on goal 1-on-1, like this is the moment.
Dictionary of thousands of words. It's way beyond comprehension of how complex this is. And yet you just gloss over, like, of course it happened. Here we are.
Can you explain to me what you understand by the term allele frequency?
Here we go.
Well, let's just save that for a separate debate also.
No. I think
You're always welcome here.
That's very important.
I'm not prepared to handle that right now. I know what allele frequency is.
I haven't spoken over you all night. And I'll not do again. But for somebody that's had over 200 debates on evolution and who constantly uses straw man arguments like an elephant has never given birth to a deck chair or something like that, right? You just use the term allele. You've tried to poo-poo evolution using the term allele frequency. I think it's really important, and I'm not going to leave this point. I'm going to stick on it and stick on it and stick on it. Can you please explain what you understand by the term allele frequency?
No, I'd rather have you explain it and me see if that's what I understand. It's been too long since I studied that phrase. You're the one who brought it up. I said you think it came from a common man and woman. We see these variations and changes within the frequencies of the alleles that they produce, and therefore that's
here. That's not what's happening here. I've asked you a direct question, and we've said there's no dodging, and I won't dodge from you. You poo-pooed evolution using the term allele frequency, which means you should understand it. There's plenty of people watching in the chat. You know, I'm interested to hear what your understanding, not what my understanding of allele frequency is, but what your understanding is, so I can better understand your argument. I'm not going to better understand your argument by telling you what I think allele frequency is, okay? But I can understand your argument if you tell me what your understanding is. So please, can you tell us all what your understanding of allele frequency is?
No, I'd rather wait for the separate debate. Let's do that in one.
This is the debate on evolution.
I looked at the debate was, what is the evidence for evolution?
Ken, this is a debate on evolution, and I'm sorry for speaking over you, but this is really important. This is a debate, and I do apologise for speaking over you, and I promise I will answer any question you want after this point. And I really do genuinely apologise for speaking over you, but I hope you realise it's a critical, important point. Okay, because we couldn't talk about isochron dating because you didn't understand it, so we moved on. We couldn't talk about ERVs because you said you don't know what they are, and we had to move on. But the very basic concept of allele frequency, we must surely know that you understand what that is, or at least I know what your understanding of that is, so we can move on in the conversation. You're not letting me, how can you have 200 debates and struggle with it? Can you please tell us what allele frequency?
No, go ahead.
Okay, the chromosomes found in all living organisms, man has 40.
Hang on, I'm just going to wind this back 5 seconds. So right, if someone asked me what is allele frequency, my answer would be, right, well, we have genes which control characteristics such as eye color, but there are many different versions of those genes. For example, blue eyes, green eyes, and those variations of those genes we call alleles. And when we talk about allele frequency, it's how frequent one of those variations of a gene is within a population, and that changes due to evolution. That is what I would say if I was under pressure to answer it quickly, like I've just been there. Kent's answer is fucking hilarious.
Okay, the chromosomes found in all living organisms, man has 46, different animals have different numbers of chromosomes, are unbelievably complicated, like a long twisted ladder. The rungs of the ladder would be the genes. These can have the alleles, as a variant of a gene. These things can vary from person to person. So I'd have to do some refreshing, but the twisted ladder, the long twisted chromosome ladder, has the rungs across it, the genes. There can be frequency differences between different people. You may have some insertions like an ERV. Let's do a whole debate just on that at another time. And I don't have any slides ready for that right now. But are you saying that because there are frequency changes in the frequency of the alleles of the genes in the DNA, that is proof that we all came from a rock? Is that?
He's got to get the rocking thing there first. Racina, no, an allele isn't a gene that codes for a phenotype. A lot of phenotypes are down to many genes. Think of it as like a flavor. So, for example, if we go to eye color, there is like you said, you got a chromosome. There's a section of DNA on one of your chromosomes that will determine what eye color you're going to have. And we've got 2 chromosomes. They come in pairs. So we've got one from mum, one from dad, right? And we'd say there is a gene for eye color, but the one we get from mum and the one we get from dad might be slightly different. The one from mum might say blue eyes. The one from dad might say green eyes. So they are different variations of the same gene. And that's all it is. They're just different variations of the same gene. It's difficult to explain it further than that, I think. So they don't necessarily directly code for a specific phenotype, because usually phenotypes are more than one gene. There are some that are monohybrid, but yes, sorry, I don't think I did a great job of explaining it there. But still, I think I did better than Kent.
Is that what you're trying to lead to?
Ken, I think what I'm saying is, and I'm going to be really polite about the way I say this, because I do respect you've been very polite in this debate, and I understand that you've got a very strong faith in creation, which is fine. I've got no problem with that whatsoever. But I am going to say that you've got to stop arguing about the science of evolution if you can't articulate without having to look up what the term allele frequency means. That would be like me having a debate with somebody about Star Wars, which was the best Star Wars film.
Well, I mean, I don't know what country you're from, but in the UK, the way that we teach it is the phenotype is the observable characteristic that is due to your genes. So eye color will be a characteristic, but blue eyes, right? You can see that will be somebody's phenotype. That's the observable characteristic. Brown hair would be an observable characteristic, and obviously it's determined by your genes. But the variation of the allele, it's determined by the alleles that you carry, really, not your genes. I'm not doing a great job of explaining this. Let's go again. So yeah, eye color is a characteristic, but if you've got blue eyes, that is your phenotype. If you've got green eyes, that is your phenotype. But everybody has the characteristic of eye color. So it's when we start getting down to the specifics, that will be the phenotype. That's how I mean, I only taught biology up to A level at the highest, and I've not taught A level for about 18 years. More recently, it was just like higher GCSE, not taught A level biology for 18 years anyway. Do physics. So, you know, I don't know what countries from, maybe use different terminologies, but that's how we teach it here.
And then having to sit there and Google who Luke Skywalker was. That's the kind of level we're at. And I'm just going to leave it at that, because I feel like I'll be bullying you if I carry on with that point. I actually feel quite bad for bringing that up already. So we won't talk about allele frequency. We won't talk about ERVs. We won't talk about isochrone dating, because you don't know about any of those things. So I'll let you bring up the next point and I'll answer it.
Where can you give me any example from modern history, not from a fossil? Where can any observable example be seen where any animal or plant has been observed to see it produce offspring that would be considered a different kind? I showed the definition of kind the other night in my YouTube channel, Kent Hovind Official. It shows up under the definition of species. One of the definitions is kind. And the Bible uses the word kind 20 times in the first 7 chapters. So my simple, specific question, I don't want you to dodge it. What example can you show me in the literature where somebody has observed an animal or plant produce offspring that are a different kind? What is the best example you know of? Or does this happen too slow to see it?
Well, in most cases, it does happen so slow that we can't see it, right? In many cases, it does. If we are, now, you're going to have to correct me on what your definition of kind is, but if we're going by the definition of kind, if you belong to the same kind you can bring forth, then when we looked at the ring species before, and we showed that one species ended up with 2 animals that couldn't bring forth 2 species, and therefore, by your definition, not mine, by your definition, we've got different kind.
Clive, it's funny you should say that. Clairber, I don't know, Clairber or Clairview, I forget. Clairview, sorry. Clairber is a name on Twitter. I'm getting a bit confused. She's coming on the channel on Monday, and we are going to watch the Star Wars holiday special together on this channel. I've got to make sure that we don't get hit with streams getting shut down for copyright reasons and stuff like that. But we're actually going to do a live watch along if I can get away with it.
Well, I think you showed yourself from your drawing, these 2 ring species came from an original warbler. And so you still have the same kind of animal. Alaska rabbits and Florida rabbits cannot interbreed because of various things that have happened. They're still rabbit. Is that example of a ring species of 2 different warblers that now cannot interbreed? You're saying that's enough?
Oh, Racine, you did. But thank you so much again, Racine. I really, really appreciate that. And you're right. When I teach it, obviously at like high level GCSE, even at A level, it's very dumbed down, and I wouldn't pretend, like I said, I wouldn't pretend to be like an expert in this thing. But in the UK, when we teach it, we teach about monohybrid crosses, and we say, okay, well, there are some characteristics, but it's a minority of characteristics that are determined by one, but just by one gene, and most are determined by many. You've taught me something that I didn't realize there was 15 for eye color. So you've taught me something with that. But, or do you mean there's 15 alleles? I don't know. I don't know. Like 15 different, no, because 15 alleles would be like 15 different eye colors. I don't know. Maybe it's not monohybrid. What's the word now? Anyway, thank you very much for that. You've taught me something there.
Evidence to conclude that warblers are related to cactus and mosquitoes.
Yeah, sorry, Tony.
Draw.
You asked me a very specific question, which I answered. The question you asked me was very specific. You said, according to your definition of kind, can I give you an example where one species then creates another type of kind? And I gave you a very specific example about the greenish warbler and the ring species, which meant that they could no longer bring forth. So by your definition, they were different kind. That was a question I was asking. You then followed that up with something unrelated by saying, is that enough information for me to believe? I can't even remember what you finished with that question, to believe that mosquitoes are related to elephants or something like that. No, I will go back to ERVs, but we can't talk about that because you've said you don't know anything about it. I would go back.
But you keep talking about it. Shut up. Talk about something else. Go ahead. We'll talk about that in a separate debate.
Well, yeah, but I've prepared.
Play nice. Play nice.
You told me to shut up.
I've prepared for this debate, Ken, by learning the facts and the science. I brought it, and now I'm being told I can't use it. But anyway, what's enough for me to believe that mosquitoes are related to evidence lies in the genetic analysis. More so even than the fossil record, it lies in the genetic analysis. It does seem we're very limited, though, on what we can talk about with the genetic analysis. So we can set up a second debate, and it can be all about genetics. Or we can set up a second debate, and it can be all about radioactive dating. Either one of those is fine. But you're asking me to tell you something that you've already told me I'm not allowed to talk about. But I'll give you some other example. The industrial melanism of the peppered moth. You talked about.
Thank you, Timo. Yeah, he's the shallow end of the gene pool. I like that. Thank you, mate.
About evolution, or natural selection. Are you familiar with the peppered moth example?
Ah, Rossini, you really are teaching me something here. With that, I had no idea about that. So, yeah, which is odd, because when we teach eye-color inheritance, just from the textbook and the specification, it's treated like, we do Punnett square and the monohybrid cross. We treat it just as a one gene deal. So I didn't realize. Thank you very much.
Now, let me get this clear for the record here, Your Honor. Are you saying that the peppered moth that happened in England with the Industrial Revolution is evidence of evolution? I asked you, what example can you give where something produced something that would be considered a different kind? And those are both. Do you agree they're both laws?
Oh, the peppered moth, the white and the dark peppered moth could still interbreed. But this is an example, a specific example of natural selection action. But if we look at William Rice and can't remember his other name, Davis, they did a 35 generation study on Drosophila. They took Drosophila from different environments that would interbreed. They bred them over 35 generations. And after those 35 generations, they would no longer interbreed after only 35 generations. And again, this is a paper you can look up. It's William Rice. And for the life of me, I can't remember his first name. Hopefully someone can Google it. Something Davis. William Rice and Davis, 35 generations of Drosophila, and they ended up with species of Drosophila after just 35 generations that would not interbreed. Now, you are right that normally it does take a long time, which is why we can't observe it. But, we see it in the lab all the time. We look at superbugs, etc. as well. John Endler's guppy experiment was a good one, although they would still interbreed, but they preferred not to.
Let's take one at a time here, like I always ask we do in debates, one topic at a time.
If they would interbreed, then I'm wrong. Then that's a bad example.
Moth in England, according to the story, the Industrial Revolution in the 1800s darkened the trees from coal, and the dark moths blended in better, and the light moths were more likely to be predation. It would be killed by the birds. The problem with that is they're still a moth, obviously. They're still the same kind of moth. They can still interbreed. It's the ratio of a population that has changed, not the moth. The moth is already have dark and light moths. They still have dark and light moths. That's not evolution.
It's allele frequency. There you go. You've got it. Allele frequency change. Right. Okay. They can still interbreed, but that is a change in allele frequency. Now, the thing is, I shouldn't have used that as an example of different kinds. I wanted to talk about natural selection, and I agree that they are the same kind of animal. But I've given you at least two. I've given you the Drosophila that Rice and Davis talk about that would not interbreed. I've given you the Greenwich warbler that, again, they would not interbreed. So by your definition, I've answered the question. By your definition, they are animals that will no longer bring forth, therefore they are different kind. So you can maybe change your definition of what you think a kind is, but if you're going to stick with your definition, then I'll give you examples of it. So which one are you going to take? What do you fancy?
Well, again, the burden of proof would be on me if I was asking for my theory to be taught in schools. I am not. You are demanding we all teach your religion in schools of evolution, and so the burden of proof is really on you.
But you said no grandstanding.
Okay, the moths already have dark and light in the genes. The allele frequency, let's suppose they were 95% light moths and 5% black. So the allele frequency changed, according to the story, when they started burning coal in the factories. Now, I have slides on this on my video 4 out of my 18,000 slides. I can't find it quickly right now. But I agree. They always were dark and light moths. Then nothing has changed. They didn't doctor in pink or green or purple. That's not in the gene code. All that happened was, according to the story, the allele frequency of those surviving changed. And now it's all dark moths surviving on the dark trees. Now, the truth of the matter is, one family did a study on this and said, after 40 years of watching the trees, they found 2 moths on the trees. They don't rest on the trees. They rest on the branches and under the leaves. The whole story of the peppered moth is pure baloney. It's not evidence for evolution at all. Even if it was a change in allele frequency where they're now mostly dark instead of mostly light, it's still a moth. Your story about the warbler, it's still a warbler. Your story about Drosophila, the guy raising a bunch of flies in the laboratory, 35 generations, he got 2 flies that won't breed with each other. They're still a fly. Still a fly.
They won't bring forth, Ken. If they won't bring forth, do they still satisfy your definition of a kind?
And this is where he dances around, because he did say before that if animals are the same kind, they are able to bring forth, they are able to reproduce. So we just give him examples of how evolution or natural selection can lead to animals that can't reproduce, and he starts to dance around it.
If those Greenwich warbler, do they satisfy your definition of a kind, even though they won't bring forth?
I would say a 7-foot man and a 3-foot tall pygmy probably could not bring forth either. But they're still the same kind. Yes, I think the warblers on the opposite sides of the ring are still a warbler. I think the Drosophila I think they're still the same kind. There may be mechanical reasons. I don't know why they can't bring forth, but they're still obviously came from a common ancestor. The ancestor could obviously bring forth. So yes, I'll stick by that. I think it's still obvious to a 4-year-old. They're still the same kind. That's not evolution.
So we change our definition of kind now from animals that can bring forth to animals that might not be able to bring forth.
Originally could bring forth. Noah probably had 8,000 kinds of animals on the ark. He probably only had 2 warblers. They've now developed into different species that somebody's decided to call a different species, but they're still a warbler. If that's the best you've got as evidence that we all came from amoeba, I think you guys need to go start a private school and teach it there and not teach it in public school.
Well, let me just address that again, because you keep going back to if that's the best you've got. Can I just reiterate for everyone watching, for anyone that's new, I actually brought a lot more, but we're not allowed to talk about ERVs because Kent doesn't know anything about it. We're not allowed to talk about isochron dating because Kent doesn't know anything about it. I had to teach you the term allele frequency, which I'm glad to see you using now. So it's not that I haven't got evidence, it's that we've decided we have to leave that for another debate because you won't talk about it now, which is fine. I'm not expecting to be an expert on everything, but please stop saying that that's the best I've got when the stuff I have brought, you aren't prepared to talk about. So please don't be discouraged with that.
Let me summarize for the audience here. The best you have is ERVs, some insertion in an already incredibly complex code. Something's been inserted in that code by a virus. And that is evidence that we're all related. I found my peppered moth slides right from the textbooks, Kettlewell's moths. They talk about this as evidence for evolution, industrial melanism. This is covered on my video number 4. It's in all the textbooks. Zoos, museums have displays about this. The claim is that it changed the allele frequency, the percentage that were black versus the percentage of white. I'll put together more on that if you'd like. The moths have no tendency to choose matching backgrounds. The moth doesn't care what he lands on. Kettlewell's results have never been replicated in further studies. The shift in population did occur, but before the lichens grew on the polluted trees. We cover all this in video 4 with lots of stuff, references. Let me find some here. The evolution of the peppered moth is an evolutionary instance of directional color change in the moth population as a consequence of air pollution. They're using this as evidence for evolution. It's simply not true. What happened was the allele frequency, the percentage of...
Just ask you, Williams, well, it wasn't a question, but I want to address this. I think this is what I said to Kent early at the beginning. I certainly said it to Ray Comfort, which I also debated on the Marvel Girls channel, that whether you're religious or not, if the fact is all the scientific signposts point towards evolution. So if you're not religious, then evolution is your answer. And if you are religious, then you've only got 2 options. One is that God created evolution and left all these scientific signposts for you to understand his work. Or number 2, if you're going to deny evolution exists, then you're basically saying God has deceived you with the scientific signposts he's leaving you. And I know which one I'd take. And I never actually say whether I'm atheist or whether I'm a believer or anything like that, because it gets held against you when you're doing these debates. If you say that I'm an atheist, then suddenly what scientific arguments you bring forth are then just dismissed because, oh, well, you just want to discredit religion. And if you say you're religious, then your arguments are discredited because by definition, you insert supernatural beliefs where scientific explanations should live. So I just don't, you can't win with it. So I never say. But yeah, you're not left with very good options. Well, like I said, anyway, I'll just hit play.
Of dark versus percentage of light. We've got dark and light people today in Alabama where I live. They can still interbreed. We don't have any green people or orange people. So the frequency, all that could happen is choice of something already existing in the gene code. Was there anything new added to the gene code of the warbler? Was there anything new added to the gene code of the fly, the Drosophila? Was anything new added to the gene code? Something new has to be added to change an amoeba to a whale. A whole bunch of things have to be added to the gene code of the amoeba. And do you believe we all had a single common ancestor that was a single cell? That's what the textbooks teach. I'm assuming that's the religion you follow, that we all came from a single cell creature. You have to add a whole lot of stuff to that cell to get legs and wings and lungs and digestive system and reproductive system.
And it takes a long time, you know.
Oh, time. There you go. Okay.
And it takes a long time, which isochron dating proves. But, you know, I'm just struggling with the point. Yeah, you are right that the peppered moth is an example of natural selection, but they are the same kind.
I'm learning a lot from Rossini.
I'm not holding out massive amount, but are you happy with
ubiquitous
ubiquitous genes? You know what ubiquitous genes are?
Define the term as you understand it. Genes that are specific for one particular creature. Is that what you're saying?
Oh, I mentioned ubiquitous genes here. I have no idea what they are. I must have learnt them before the debate. I'm going to be interested to see what I say about them. I hope I get them right.
No, a ubiquitous gene is or sometimes often referred to as housekeeping genes. Have you heard of those?
I'm sorry, I could not hear that. What kind
No
of
idea. No idea
They are
what the bald
sometimes
guy's
referred
saying.
to as housekeeping genes.
housekeeping genes? Genes that maintain stability. Is that what you're saying?
No, so like a ubiquitous gene is one that can take many, many different forms, and they are in an enormous range of organisms to perform a specific function. So some of them may perform functions like help ion channels in a membrane work, which all mammals and reptiles, etc., may need to have, so something like that. Now, these genes, these ubiquitous genes, they can take many, many different forms. All right. So when you're looking at the coding of them, the amino acid sequences that they produce, they can take many, many different forms, produce many similar sequences, but still perform exactly the same function. So what I'm saying is that if I have one that operates an ion channel in my membrane, there's no need for it to be the same ubiquitous gene as that you've got to perform the same function. Does that make sense?
Right. So are you saying the genes that can perform these various functions, or these various genes that perform the same function, are is not an example of a pretty intelligent design creating this? I mean, that sounds pretty amazing. If you have a tool that can do a variety of functions, I think somebody had to design that tool.
Yes, but I've not finished the point yet. So the point is essentially this: it really should not matter. It shouldn't matter at all which version of that ubiquitous gene you've got, or I've got, or a pigeon has got, or an elephant has got, or whatever. But what we find, and this, I've got a slide on this, but I'll not get Jared to pick up the slides for me. What we find is that within, when we look at the fossil record again, and we compare that, we do the genetic analysis, and we look for these specific ubiquitous genes, we can find that with our closest ancestors, we share the same versions of these genes. But with our more distant ancestors, we don't share the same version of those genes. But yet when we go up that phylogenetic tree and we start looking at different clumps and clusters, those that are close together, as predicted by other genetic analysis, and as predicted by dating techniques, and as predicted by fossil records, they have the same ubiquitous genes as each other, closer related species, even though there's no need for that to happen. So only two things are possible here. One is that evolution has taken place and these genes have been passed down as evolution says, and that's why similar species have the same ubiquitous genes. Or creation occurred, and for some reason, God has decided to trick us all. And he's tricked us all by taking the same type of housekeeping gene for whatever ion channel we're talking about and put it in all primates, take a different one.
Yeah, this is what I was meaning before. It's got to come across as a trick. If we're not meant to believe in evolution, it's got to come across as a devious, deliberate ploy to leave signposts that evolution occurs.
And put it in all elephants, take a different one and put all rabbits and hares and put one in there. Why would he trick us? Why would he do that with these signposts?
Now, you're giving two false answers, asking which is correct, like saying which is correct, 3 and 4 is 12 or 3 and 4 is 15. You give two possible choices, neither of which is correct. Could it be that the
It's a good question, William. I can't answer it, but it's a good question.
genetic similarity in these creatures is an example of a common designer? I think you'll find all internal combustion cars driving on the highways here in Alabama have gas tanks. Some have gas tanks in the front, some have gas tanks in the side, some have gas tanks in the back. They've all got gas tanks. That proves they all evolved from a skateboard. That's the kind of logic you're using. The fact that there are similarities in all these life forms is proof of a common designer. It doesn't prove a common ancestor, or that the designer is trying to trick us. Is the fact that General Motors gas tank is in the trunk, in the back, and Ford gas tank is in the trunk? Oh, they're trying to trick us. No, that's a good design that works. The gene code is beyond complexity that we can understand. Unbelievable. One cell is more complex than your whole country of England. With all the infrastructure you've been developing for thousands of years over there, one single cell is more complicated than that. The code found in your DNA, one person's DNA, if this was stretched out and unwound the chromosome, your DNA would reach from Earth to the moon and back 500,000 times.
Yes,
and you think that came by chance? That's a complicated code.
So let's just review that. You just said, you kind of made my point for me there. You said, are those ubiquitous genes, those housekeeping genes, are they not evidence of a common designer? So let's say there's a common designer who's done exactly what you said. For some reason, if that's happened, because it doesn't matter which of these housekeeping genes, we could all have the same one. We could all have the same one, and they'd all work in all of us, right? All these organisms. But you're saying that a common designer, rather than put the same gene in every animal, has decided to create multiple versions of this gene, and then group them together and say all these primates, right, that seem to look very similar, I'm going to give them this version of the gene. And, you know, these birds that look a little bit different, I'm going to give them this version of the gene, and so on and so on. And he spread out all these housekeeping genes when he could have given us all the same one. So when we start learning genetic analysis, we can look at that evidence and think, what? That evolution was real. Like, you know, by your definition, like if a creator has done that, he set out to deliberately trick us. Because we don't need all those different genes.
Well, I guess if I was God and I was designing life forms, I would produce a lot of different things in there that would look like similar designer, but somebody could interpret otherwise, because he knows there are people like you who are going to hate him and not want to believe he exists. And it would be enough to trip him up, like Sherlock Holmes, you know, a clue that leads the wrong direction here. Not deceitful, just he knows your hatred in your heart for him. And he says, well, I'm going to give him something to trip on then. And then when they finally do understand, oh, no, I missed it, then it'll be too late. I don't know. But I think there are answers to all of these. But you're dealing with a code that is beyond imagination with how complex it is. And I would stick by my argument that the similar gene code is evidence of a common designer, like the code of Microsoft Word and Microsoft PowerPoint have thousands of lines of similar code.
Well, unfortunately,
DNA is at times more complex than a Microsoft program. All computer codes are two digits, zeros and ones. DNA is 4-bit code, CATG, which makes it orders of magnitude more complicated.
It's the fact is with the Human Genome Project, we have fully mapped the human genome. So
like
it's
that
big,
one, Surrender Monkey.
we know where all the genes are. We know where everything is. But I'll pick up on something else. You've made the assumption. I said to you my beliefs at the beginning of this are irrelevant, but you've just jumped to the assumption, because I'm arguing against your standpoint, that I must be an atheist. Right?
Yeah, you're right. I am assuming that you don't want the Bible to be true and you don't want the creation story to be true because it might affect your lifestyle. That's just my assumption.
Well, it doesn't affect my lifestyle at all. But like, why could it not be? And I'm not, you know, my beliefs are irrelevant, but I'm just playing devil's advocate here. Why could it not be that I believe in God? But I believe because God left all the signposts, because he left all the signposts of genetic analysis, he left all the signposts of the fossil record, he left all the signposts of everything we've discussed today, including the ice cream dating, etc. You know, he's left all those signposts. Why can he not have created life as it is now through the mechanism that science has revealed? Because science is revealing stuff whether you like it or not. So why would he put all that stuff there to trick us?
The mechanism that science has revealed. Science means knowledge. All the knowledge of all the farmers in the history of the world tells us cows produce cows. Has science now revealed that cows and mosquitoes are related?
Cows produce milk.
Where did science prove that? I think you have a vivid imagination. You and make good friends, but this is imaginary. Nobody's ever seen an animal produce a different kind. Never.
Well, let's just remind them that. We are going to have another debate where we use genetic analysis, because remember, we've already said that I'm not allowed to use genetic analysis because you don't understand it. So when we talk about
Al, just a minute. We've got 2 hours. After the program, you do it 30 minutes. Can we call it here? And you give your last word. I'll give my last word.
That'd be fine.
Yes.
That'd be great. Thank you, both of you. Go ahead.
Go ahead. You went first. Finish up. What's your final word?
All right, my last word is that I opened up the debate by saying that I want to look at both sides of the story and which one seems to fit science better. And when we look at the creation side, you know, we've heard nothing even vaguely scientific that really lends us to believe that these strata with these nicely organized fossils, you know, in increasing complexity could appear. We've not heard anything scientific from the creation side at all. So I stand by the fact that the fossil record, genetic analysis, radioactive dating, and 2 of those 3 things we've not been allowed to talk about, they are more than ample to show that evolution is more scientific than creation.
Okay, I would stand by what I said. The Bible says clearly that all the plants and animals are going to bring forth after their kind. And I think every 4-year-old on the planet would tell you both warblers are still a bird, and both the flies they got that can't interbreed anymore are still a fly. I don't think you've given any scientific evidence that flies and warblers are related. You can believe that if you wish, but that is a religious belief. It is not science. I think all the science that we see, science is what we observe, study, test, and demonstrate. All the science tells us flies produce flies. Now, whether they can be classified as a new species, because this is messed with in the laboratory. I think the Bible has not been demonstrated to be proven wrong. They bring forth after their kind. A 4-year-old will tell you those warblers are still a bird. So I don't think you've demonstrated at all that warblers and flies have a common ancestor, which was a single-celled creature, which came from a rock, which came from a dot of nothing. And we're not allowed to talk about the Big Bang, which is part of your theory. We're not allowed to talk about abiogenesis, which has to be part of your theory. We're not allowed to talk about variations beyond the little bitty variation like a warbler. We're not allowed to talk about that, because that's macroevolution. It doesn't happen. I think you have a religious belief. You have very strongly held this religious belief. Lots of people have strongly held religious belief, but that's all you have is a religion. When you believe warblers and flies and bananas and cactus are related, I feel sorry for you for believing such a thing. But I'll think there are things I don't understand about God's amazing creation. I think that's normal. Nobody knows what gravity is, okay? Nobody knows what light is. You know what it does. It can measure the speed, but we don't know what it is. But I choose to stand in awe of the designer and say, wow, God, this DNA code you made is amazing. I can praise God for the creation He made, and the doubts I have or the questions I don't have answered yet, I'm going to say, Lord, I don't understand, but I trust you. Rather than until I understand, I'm not going to trust you. That's a choice everybody's got to make. Anyway, drdino.com, my website, and YouTube, Kent Hovind Official. And come visit, Al, come visit Dinosaur Adventureland. We'll give you a tour of the place, put you up here for free, feed you, and show you around our science center and take any questions. You can sit right here beside me. We'll do the debate on ERV. So you sit right here.
That's very kind.
Awesome.
Very kind of you.
And that was the end of the debate. We just said goodbyes after that. So there we go. We've gone on for, I mean, I tend to just do like streams that last an hour. This has been a mammoth one for me. So I'm going to call it a night now. I just want to thank all of you for being here. And it's Christmas. I'm going to do more streams. We'll get the chess. If you're still there, Timo, we'll sort something out in the Discord about the chess stream. If you have been gifted a membership and you're still here, I know some people have gifted memberships, then do check out the members tab. You will see a video that says how to connect, how to access the members only Discord. If you get in there, that's where everybody in there is just a member. We can all talk about whatever we want to talk about, really. But you know, I'm in there every day. And so, yes, do that. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Thank you, everybody, for super chatters as well. There's so many, just blew my mind, really. So thank you so much for that. And I'm going to hopefully be back this weekend with either an update on somebody that doesn't believe viruses exist, or an update on the final experiment fallout. That'll be one of the two. Oh, yeah, Mohammed Shafiq is still here. And don't forget to check his channel out. Honestly, nobody has done as much undercover, kind of like investigative, important work than this man right there. So I would definitely check him out. Rosina, thank you for teaching me what I didn't know about inheritance of eye color. Oh, hang on. Oh, and as I say the word Rosina, thank you very much again for that. Thank you. But thanks for teaching us all that stuff. I really appreciate that. Right. I'm going to hit end stream now. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.